I'm going to go ahead and start with the introductory stuff, and then we'll do a roll call after that. How about that? I'll call the meeting to order at 7:01 p.m. and welcome to everyone to the Westwood Planning Board meeting. All of our meetings are recorded by Westwood Media Center and broadcast live on local cable television Comcast Channel 12 and Verizon Channel 42. Meetings are also available on Westwood Media Center's YouTube channel, and they are live streamed. If you're having any trouble logging into Zoom, please go to zoom.us and click on Join Meeting. And the meeting ID is 891-8273-4987. While people are unmuted, please turn off your cell phone ringers to eliminate background noise. And we start these meetings with board members and the planning staff unmuted and on video, and then as the chair recognizes individuals to speak, we will unmute them. Board members may choose to mute themselves when they're not speaking. This helps to minimize the background noise. It's the cars racing by on 109 here. Before we begin, I will outline the process. Our planning board meetings consist of 3 types of agenda items. We consider applications that have been submitted to the board and conduct public hearings where a public comment portion is required. We have other applications that are not a formal public hearing. The public may have an opportunity to comment at the board's discretion. And third, we have administrative items where board members discuss issues and deal with things like approval of meeting minutes, planning future agendas, and hearing updates from staff. Prior to each agenda item, the chair will introduce the item and provide a little bit of descriptive context. Then the chair invites the applicant to address the board, give a presentation summarizing what's being requested. Board members, we already have the application materials, so we've read those before coming to the meeting. They're also published on the town website, and board members will ask questions. Then sometimes we have professional staff, outside experts may provide comments as well. If there's in this remote meeting format, you can participate in several ways. Attendees can raise their hand and wait to be unmuted. And we'll also, for board members, it's helpful. I will try to keep an eye on that if you raise your hand. And then we recognize the person to speak over the Zoom meeting application or from a telephone dial-up. If there's somebody on the phone, we'll check that and they can press *9 if they want to get our attention. Following public comment portions, the board will deliberate and make a decision or continue to a future date. All of these remote meetings require that our votes be by a roll call. So I'll go through each time and have a roll call vote for anything that we need to vote on. So with that, I will start the meeting off with a roll call of members present here. And did we get a phone call or anything? Nope.
No.
All right, so I'll do a roll call, and if people could just raise their hand. Mr. McCusker?
Here.
Mr. Paff?
Here.
Mr. Gotti?
Here.
And Ms. Conan, not here. And I'm David Atkins. I'm chairing the meeting tonight. Also, our town planner is Abby McCabe, and our town council, Pat Ahern. And I believe we have our Director of Community and Economic Development, Nora Loughnane, is here. And Jessica Cole is our recording secretary. So with that, we will start the meeting. Abby, have we any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda.
All right, the first item on the agenda is a continuation of the Environmental Impact and Design Review and Special Permit public hearing for 384 Washington Street. This was for a change of use, retail sales and services, and a special permit for parking relief. As we left at our last meeting, we had raised a number of issues. I think with that, I will just turn it over to the applicant to address how they responded to those. But I believe we had parking, handicap space, snow removal, and monument display were the kind of the things I remember as key issues. So
All right.
As the applicant.
Mr. Chairman, good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening.
Sal Frangiosa, the applicant. Mr. Frangiosa is on also. When we last met with you on April 6th, there were some questions raised, as you mentioned, about snow removal, handicap space, where the parking would occur, and so forth. And we've had We submitted to the planning office last week 3 options. And I think the option that Ms. McCabe indicated might be most favorable was option number 3, which hopefully you folks have. And that calls for, let me just see if that may be that's one of the parking plans, but
Okay.
that's one that shows an accessible space in the front, a standard space in the front, 2 spaces in the back. Option 3 was submitted, which shows a different layout, and this looks to be it. This is provides 2 standard spaces in the front, 2 on the left-hand side looking from the street, which would be the southerly side, and then 2 in the rear. There's an additional space available on the north side or the right-hand side of the building as you look at it. Those are all standard spaces. In reviewing this with our architect pointed out that the Code of Mass Regulations do not require a parking space to be indicated as a handicap space if there are fewer than 15 parking spaces on the site, and we fall within that category. And it's our understanding that the Westwood zoning bylaw and building department also follow the mass regs on that issue. So we have not shown a handicap space, although I think, as you can see, there is plenty of space in that with the standard space area around that potential parking spot where somebody could easily access or get out of a vehicle.
Abby, let me just, Abby, you checked with the building inspector also on this, right? And
Right. Myself and Joe Doyle, the building commissioner, double checked our zoning, and it refers to the state architectural access board requirements, and no accessible spaces required for lots less than 15 parking spaces. So strictly required by the zoning, 11 spaces would be required here. So technically they're not required to provide an accessible space.
thank you.
All right, thank you. The plan before you shows markings for entrance and exit. Entrance from the south side of the property, a one-way marker to be put on the pavement, and then exit out on the north side, heading northbound on Washington Street, the northwest corner. There was some discussion about where employees would park. We have space for the employees in the rear of the building. I do note that a suggested condition that Ms. McCabe sent along to us earlier today, and I think she sent it to us the end of last week also, suggests that employees shall park in the rear of the building. I would raise a question, Mr. Chairman, if that's necessary on a day when we don't have customers or we don't have many people coming in. By the way, everything is by appointment only. Would it be necessary to have employees park way in the back if the side spaces are expected to be available along the side of the building all through the day? That's one question I have, but we do have space for the employees in the back as appropriate and as necessary. Also, there was a question about snow removal, and the recommendation is, which I think agrees with our thinking on it, that in minor snow events, we could clear the snow from the parking areas, the driveway areas, so as not to impede access and keep the snow on the site. If we had a major storm, then Mr. Frangiosa understands that he would and agrees that he would have to remove snow from the site, and he has that capability. But an average snowstorm, it wouldn't be necessary. There's enough room to the rear of the building and alongside the sides that would not interfere with parking and allow for the snow to be kept on the site. So that, I think, responds to that. Is a proposed condition that the catch basin be cleaned prior to occupancy and then be cleaned as needed, typically in the fall and spring. And we understand that condition, and that has been conveyed to the owner, who I think may be on the call tonight, Mr. Chairman. But that he understands that that is going to be a requirement for the use of the building as proposed. Beyond that, there was a suggested condition number 1 had to do with outside display of merchandise. If you look at option 3, we have presented a plan that shows outside display of merchandise, and in fact, they also serve as bollards. And there had been a request, I think, or by one of the members at the last meeting that we provide some sort of bollards to protect the building. And we submit that the proposed display of merchandise serves that purpose as bollards, as well as showing some of our merchandise outside of the building. Now, I know that this is an issue that is a concern to some people, but I'm not aware of anything in your bylaw that actually prohibits outside display, except to say that you cannot need to have, I think, a minimum area from the street line of, in this district, 20 feet back, and we have more than that available. We have, I think the measurement is well over 20 feet coming back from the building. And in fact, I may be misquoting the actual measurement. I don't have it in front of me now. 15 feet from the street line. So we don't propose to put any merchandise there. We only propose to put it as shown in the picture a moment ago, the rendering, right in front of the building. This is not unheard of in various districts in the town. Over in High Street, in the center of town, the High Street Market has outside display. Roach Brothers next door, almost next door to this property, does. Down on Route 1, Lambert's, which is, according to the zoning map, is in a residential district, has outside display. We're just asking for this. These are not items that are going to be creating a mess or moving around or getting blown around. They certainly can't, considering their weight. And Mr. Frangiosa thinks this is would be helpful to his business. So we've tried to respond. I hope the board considers we've responded to the concerns. I know there might be some need to discuss some of these, but we've answered, I think, the question on snow removal, whether a handicapped space is required, where customers would park, what conditions there might be, appointment only, cleaning of the catch basin, and so forth. This is a use of the building that is much less intensive than other uses that could be made in this district, which allows for retail. And by keeping it appointment only, we're reducing the traffic coming and going. So we would hope that the board would look favorably on the request for relief as set forth in Mr. Frangiosa's application. We're happy to answer any questions. He's available on the call if we need him to explain anything related to the business. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. I wanted to acknowledge Ms. Conant has joined the meeting, so all 5 of the board members are here now.
Thank you.
So with that, I'd like to see if there are questions. If board members want to raise their hand and jump in.
I have a couple.
Let's see, I think I saw Ms. Conant's hand first.
Okay.
So go ahead, Debbie. We are not hearing you. Let's see, do you have your volume up or? So we're still not getting anything. Now you're muted, unmuted. Can you type something in the Q&A or in the chat? Another thing, you could call in on the phone number, might be a good way to do this if you're having difficulty with the Zoom. Like you keep the video active, but call in on the phone.
Debbie, is there the little arrow beside the audio microphone? And then there's an audio settings.
Play.
Oh.
Mia,
There's.
We can hear you.
can you hear me okay now?
Yep.
Did you hear me screaming? Trying to get one of my kids to help me. Okay, can you hear me now? That's right, I got it now, thank you. So I'm okay now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, a couple of comments. On the initial paperwork submission, they said that there was going to be no outdoor displays. And I'm not sure why that changed, but I don't really think that the presentation of tombstones outside, and for lack of a better word, it's kind of tacky. And I'd rather see the ballads there. So I'm just gonna mention a couple of things and then you can respond. One of the concerns I have is the snow removal in the back. If there are cars parked back there, I drove around back there. I'm not really sure where you're going to put all the snow. And the third was, I know that you said you don't need a handicap spot, but if you look at the Mass General law on it, it says that the most stringent requirement is the one you have to use. So Mass law may say 0, but federal law says 1. So I think that needs to be looked into. I called the state today, but they are working remotely and they haven't gotten back to me yet. So I don't think that at this point we can say that it is 0, even though it says that we utilize the state law under our bylaw. It says federal will trump it if it's more than what the state law requires. So that's something we need to look at. That is all my comments.
Anyone else? Or
Mr. Chairman, do you want me to answer the questions or try to as we?
yes. Why don't you, yes.
Thank you. I just found my video too. All right. I'm only catching up with Ms. Conant on this technical stuff. As far as the outside display, I've never seen a monument store that doesn't have an outside display. And Mr. Frangiosa had prepared the application, and I don't have it. I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but I'll let him answer that. As far as the snow goes, if we have a major snow event, Mr. Frangiosa will remove the snow that's necessary to make the parking areas usable. We're not going to have employees there, and Mr. Frangiosa is one of the proposed employees. We're not going to have people there in the middle of a storm, parking cars or getting in the way of his removal. So I hope, and I don't think that's going to be an issue. As far as the handicap space goes, our architect had called it to our attention. We had a discussion with the planner about it. I looked at the regulations, which are quite clear that they're not required if you have fewer than 15 spaces. And I don't know why Massachusetts would have a regulation that's so directly in violation of any federal law, but my understanding is the local bylaw and the actions or the past practice of the town follow the state regulations, and that is what is proposed here. So I apologize, Ms. Conant. I wasn't focusing on any federal law on it because we were told that Massachusetts law was going to control this, and that has been the practice in the town and under the local bylaw. As far as outside display, maybe Mr. Frangiosa wants to weigh in on that. He is on the call, and maybe you can sign in on that, and I'll mute myself.
Yes, Mr. Frangiosa, do you want to?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
All I can see is you. Is that okay?
Yes, we can see you.
All right. So I guess number one, I'm kind of offended that everybody keeps calling this tombstones. If God forbid one of your family members came to me, I wouldn't be selling you a tombstone. This isn't Sleepy Hollow Cemetery where Paul Revere's tombstone or Jesse James's tombstone is there. These are granite monuments that some detailed etchings that are done in Barry, Vermont, and then sent to me. So that's number one. And again, as far as the parking with the snow removal, there wouldn't be cars back there. I would clear the snow first and truck it out of there if I have to. I don't know if I helped Mrs. Condit with that.
Thank you. I'll go to Mr. Gotti has his hand raised, and then I'll come back to Chris Paff.
I think okay. Two questions. Well, one is sort of an observation just on the exterior signage. You know, looking at the bylaw and looking at what we have in there is in 6215, where it says to preserve or enhance the character of the town by requiring signage which is compatible with the surroundings. And I don't know that I find that to be particularly compatible. I understand the need to indicate what the business is, and I think that the exterior signage that was shown on the front of the building and the side of the building adequately convey that. I think the snow removal piece has been adequately addressed. And my only other comment regarding the handicap spot was, I think, you know, both L3 was the one that was shown with the 7 spots. Both have 2 spots out front. I think that same spot that you had on L1 that was handicapped, while it is not a requirement, probably a nice business-friendly way to accommodate for that. So I don't see that that would be something that would be an undue ask. So those are my comments.
All right, thanks, Mr. Gotti. Mr. Paff.
Hi, thanks. Couple of things. It was mentioned, I was the board member that mentioned about the bollards last time. And while I still believe that something should be put in place, doesn't have to be bollards, it could be curbing or something like that, parking curbing. But those monuments are not, as far as I could tell, are not anchored in the ground and would not provide protection from the store or for the store for a car coming through. They would be knocked over and knocked into the store. So that's, I don't think that is doing double duty as was alluded to in the opening. At least in my mind, I don't think it's offering the same level of protection that something else would. Second, with regard to the entrance and the exit, I noticed you had paintings for arrows for entrance and exit. I find that those are not sufficient. I think they're helpful, but people pulling in don't see those until they've already pulled in. So I think something like the neighbor here at Roach Brothers has in the exit closest to the fire station, they have a sign that simply says exit only to prevent people from coming in from the wrong way. So I guess my point is, if there's cars parked on the street in front or there's traffic, they're not necessarily going to see those arrows from the other lane, the southbound street, side of the street of Washington Street. So small signs indicating entrance and exit only, I think, could be a help to your business for people coming in, so that they are coming in the way you're intending them to come in addition to the paintings on the parking area. Third, the spaces. It seems like we're going to a lot of trouble to accommodate the outdoor displays. And while I won't comment right now on the outdoor displays, the parking spaces, to me, seem unnecessarily congested right in front of the front door. And my proposal would be to split them out so that each start towards the corner of the building and leaving an open access to the front door in case, and as Mr. Gotti mentioned, maybe the spot on the right could be dedicated as handicap, and someone could get out and then enter through the center door, the front door there. If there is a car parked there, all of these monuments that they're parked in front of are going to be obscured from view. So your light and mailbox proposed display are going to be blocked either way. I would propose to keep the entrance to the front door accessible and not jam in the parking spaces as they are right there. It just, if people park poorly, there's no easy way to get in that building. And although handicap accessibility may not be something we're forced to comply with here, it just makes sense that you don't have a 1 foot, 18-inch access between two bumpers for people to get through, especially in winter where it could be even worse. So that was my comment about that. And lastly, I personally don't have an inherent problem with the outdoor display of memorials. But it does seem like we're shoehorning a lot in here to accommodate that. It wouldn't matter to me if they were things that are in front of Roach Brothers or things in front of High Street Market like they have, but there's just not a lot of acreage here. And it just seems like we're trying to jam a lot in a very small amount of space.
All right, thanks, Mr. Pfaff. Do you want to respond to that, Mr. Hearn?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pfaff. On the question, it unfortunately doesn't show up very well, but on the plan L3, option 3 plan, there are some signs above grade called out, and I was just trying to look at them. If we had a larger sign, but there's a 2-sided sign called out at the corner by the entrance driveway and one by the exit driveway.
My apologies, I did not note that.
Well, I didn't either. And I mean, I kind of missed it because it's rather faint in my copy, but those are there. On the question that you raised about spreading the parking out, I understand that, although that might make, if somebody had to leave, say somebody were parked by the side of the building, and we've considered that might be a sort of overflow parking for a customer. If we've got somebody parked too close to the, I guess it would be the southwest corner roughly of the building, it might be a little tight, somebody coming and going. Now, one suggestion I have, or a question I might pose, is whether the parking would be away from the building and closer to the curbing that's along the front of the property. And that would not crowd the front of the building at all. Mr. Frangiosa might be able to answer that better in terms of the physical characteristics of the site, but
You got muted.
I hit the wrong button accidentally. Yeah, thank you. There might be, some curbing on the front. Somebody could park up closer to that, leave plenty of room for somebody going in and out of the building. But I also understood at our last meeting that there was a concern that we not box people in who might have to leave a meeting, an appointment earlier than others. So I agree it's a little tight, but we're trying to make use of a building that's been vacant for a while and a use that does not involve a lot of people coming and going as other retail or office uses might. So that's what we're doing. But again, opening it up to or pushing the cars more toward the street, certainly keeping them on the property, that might solve some of the concerns that Mr. Pfaff mentioned. I think, well, I hope that answered, that's what I understood to be the concern. But the signs are there, and I'm glad that I saw them, and I'm glad that we've been able to call them to your attention. I wish I had earlier in the meeting. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Mr. McCusker, did you have any questions or?
Yes. Question for Pat. Pat, do you agree that the ADA, the federal ADA law would would take precedence as opposed over to state law?
Well, I'm doing some research on this as we sit here. And it appears that the federal law is advisory, and there's no penalty for non-compliance. That's what some quick research shows. And so I, you know, if that's the case, then no, that if there's no teeth and it's an advisory law, I don't think if we've been consistent in our application, I think we should remain consistent in our application. So it seems to me that if they have someone who's disabled coming in for a meeting, they can identify a spot where they can park and have access to the front door. It looks like a fairly flat front door, and it looks like the door opens wide. So I don't see it as something like a big parking lot where you need, for every 1,000, you need 25 handicap spots. We're not talking, we've got 7 spots, it's less than the 15, and the federal guidelines seem to be advisory from what I could tell with quick research.
Thank you. Moving on to the monuments is being used as bollards. That's not going to fly. They would have to be specifically secured below the frost line, and they would need, I mean, granite just doesn't have the tensile strength to hold back a car. So that's just not going to cut it. Some curbing or something has to be there. Another comment is, I appreciate you wanting to advertise your wares, as it were, but the way this is set up, I just don't think you have the room. I agree with Chris that we're just putting way too much right in line with that door. And I just don't think it's going to be feasible. Moving on, if we wanted to move those parking spots off back towards the street, we're going to be putting basically, the access, the driveway for cars to come through right at the edge of your door arc radius. So basically someone opening that door and coming out is going to immediately be right out in that driveway. Now, I understand there's not going to be consistent traffic going through here, but that to me just smacks of being somewhat dangerous. That's all I get to say.
All right, thanks, Mike. Maybe it would be helpful, any other immediate questions from board members or responses?
I just have one for Abby. Abby, do we have information on the stormwater system improvements that engineering had recommended?
No, I mean, there's none on site, and the applicant wasn't proposing any improvements. So the only recommendation we had so far was to clean that catch basin.
Thank you.
All right, why don't we, so we have a number of issues here. Why don't we take like a poll of, in terms of the monuments in the front? I mean, what's the sense of?
Hello?
Yes?
Oh, as far as the granite post, the 6x6 post, those would act as bollards, not the monuments themselves. And those are 8 feet, so there's about 3 feet that sit in the ground. So that's what I was thinking about when I was selling those lampposts, that I'd put it right in the corner of the building, and that would act as a bollard, not the monuments. I realized the monuments would slide if somebody hits them. But like Mr. McCuskey just said, that it'd have to be in the ground, and that's what I intended on doing. I didn't know if he realized those were 8 feet tall.
All right, so
Well, I just to respond to that, I appreciate those light posts to be drilled in the ground. It's just that they're going to have to withstand a lot more force than if they were just decorative light posts. Number two, they're so far apart that I can get 4 cars in between them. So again, that goes against what we're trying to accomplish here. I think some curbing down the front would solve all the problems, personally.
Well, if you were proposing bollards, the 6x6 granite posts are larger than a 5-inch bollard. And I could put 2 side by side if that was the case. I'm just throwing out suggestions, you know?
And as am I.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask for maybe some clarification for Mr. McCusker. Mr. McCusker, you're referring to some curbing along the front of the building or on the front of the site? Because there is curbing by the sidewalk.
No, I mean for cars in the parking area for any particular reason why they might need to be
Restrained?
restrained for any reason, something goes
Yeah,
haywire.
We have such things that in front of Camellas. We have bollards in front of Lambert's where people eat, far stronger than any granite post. It's basically for the safety of the building, the people in the building, people in the car. There's just a number of things that come into play here. So that's why I suggested the curbing. It's something we've done before. It's in a parking lot. It would basically be on this L3 plan. If everything went as planned, it would be on that dotted line between the parking and the monuments. Basically 2 precast concrete parking lot curbings. We're not talking about a significant investment here. They sit on top and they're driven into the asphalt with steel rods, so they stay stable and can withstand snowplow blades for the most part.
Chris,
I
how
don't-
high? Can you describe that a little? Like how high of a curbing are you talking about?
They're what, 4 or 6 inches, Abby?
Like bumpers.
Yeah. Yes, a car will go through it. It'll go through anything given enough speed, but it's there just as an added protection. The concrete post that you're referring to is just going to break and possibly land on the car or go through the window into the building, harming anybody in the way. The curbing we're talking about just gives somebody a reminder, hey, you're as far as you can go. We've all seen them in parking lots. We've all bumped into them with our front tires or back tires if we're backing in.
I agree. I just thought the granite post would suffice, would pass as a bollard.
May I ask, Mr. Chairman, if it could be an option then either to put in the curbing that was just referred to or bollards. If they're considered to be roughly equal in terms of the protection that you're seeking, and we acknowledge it's not going to be actual full-scale protection, but it slows somebody down or reminds somebody not to pull in any farther or will slow down a slow-moving vehicle. That's what they're there for. And leave it to the applicant or the property owner together to determine whether they want to put in that type of curbing that was just described or put in bollards, a number of bollards along the front, and leave it. It's going to be one or the other. Although if we had the curbing, would the board be open to the allowing the display of monuments since they're not being used as bollards, but simply as display? That would be the second question. So I don't know, Sal, is that one or the other work?
I'm on board with that, whatever they would like. I'll do
Right.
either or.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, why don't we, it sounds like we have a couple of options there. I think the sense of what I'm seeing is a sense that majority board members probably aren't supportive of the monuments being displayed. Am I correct in that? But we could have an option of a curb or bollards, and then that's something you could have, because we kind of have to, we need to make a decision tonight because of the timing of everything here. So do you think we could incorporate, Abby, do you think as a condition that we'd be able to do that specifically enough that it would work?
Yes, yep. I think you can make a condition for either the curb or bollards to be installed.
And is it the sense of everybody think that would, if we had that option, that would answer the question about the front of the store anyway?
To put in either curbing or bollards?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the adequate protection that we need to provide here for customers and employees and drivers.
Right. What about the snow removal? Have the concerns about snow removal been adequately addressed?
I think we probably just address that with a plan that gets filed as a condition with Abby. But I mean, the plan as it has been stated of being able to, minor snowstorm, you're able to handle it on site and anything, and what the definition of major or significant is, then it needs to be taken away. I mean, you're going to need to do that to operate the business. So, I mean, it just makes sense. So I think there's adequate plans in place. And if we want to formalize that with a condition, I think that would be fine.
Anyone? Okay. Anybody disagree or? All right.
No, I would echo that same thought. Mr. Hearn did mention early on, he asked a question, and I'm not sure any of us gave any remarks to it, was about employees parking in the side spots when no customers are anticipated. I personally don't have a problem with that. How you run your business is kind of up to you. I don't have a problem if employees are parking on the side of the building instead of the dedicated in the back. You're only keeping your own your customers away if that was going to be the case, and it's not good for business. So that would rectify itself if it created a problem. So I don't have a problem with how you use the spaces.
Chairman, I just didn't want to have a problem where a condition specifically required that, and there was no real need for it, no benefit derived from it, and somebody unintentionally, on a day when nobody's expected, parks on the side and is unintentionally violating the terms of the condition. So we don't want that, but I appreciate the comment.
One, as you were speaking there, one thing, and dovetailing with the snow removal, what I don't want to see is a heavy snowstorm, no customers are due in, and all the snow gets put in those employee spots in the back, rendering them useless for the next week or so. So the anticipation is that all spots will be made available. How you use them, I think, is up to you and your business, but they should all be made available, snow or sun, whatever. So I'd hate to see that back start to become a snow catch-all.
I think the condition proposed was satisfactory from our point of view, which says the applicant shall remove snow from the site in major snow events.
Okay.
So we're okay with that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's just to be really clear that the parking spaces have to be clear, and you can't push the snow obviously off the property onto the property behind there, over that, on top of that wooden fence and everything. So,
Mr. Chairman?
yes, Mr. Hearn.
Yeah, I would recommend that one of those parking spaces in front be the size of a handicap spot if it's not going to be duly noted as a handicap spot. There seems to be incongruent information about whether they have to have one or not. I'm not about to cross paths with the chief zoning officer in the town who believes that we don't, but I would like to see, having spent 10 months personally in a wheelchair, I would like to see you make one of the spots dimensionally handicap available for someone coming in who may be in a van and need help getting out, and that's a little bit longer and wider spot.
That sounds good, because the issue would be having a dedicated handicap spot there that's hardly ever used, and then basically you only have one space. But if you could make the space be the size and dimensions that are accessible, then it's like, it would be helpful.
To that end, I still would prefer to see these spaces split up to accommodate that front door more easily,
Well,
if there are 2 cars there.
where you put them is your business. I just want to make sure that if someone's coming
Sure.
with van access and they need the lift, they need room to get the lift down, they have the ability to do that.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's I appreciate council's comment on that. I think that's one of those things that in an intelligent operation of a business, we're not going to try to make it difficult for customers to get in and out. These are all going to be by appointment. And if somebody calls up, it's one of the questions in setting the schedule and setting the appointment might be, do you need any special accommodations in terms of getting in and out of the building or parking or anything like that? We're not interested in making it difficult or scaring away customers. And that would be a question to make sure of that. In terms of leaving a space, or maybe if Mr. Hearn's comment was to paint a space larger than the standard space, we can do that as long as I would hope nobody feels that they can't use it on a day when it isn't needed for somebody with accessibility problems, by having a handicapped space painted there. So we can paint the space that's bigger than the usual space, and we can try to space them out a little bit without impeding traffic, so that they don't appear to be right on the by the doorway. I think there's a little space to move one of the parking spots forward to the north a little bit, and maybe to the south a little bit. But again, we're not going to be, we certainly don't want people to find it difficult to come in the door, because that's the whole idea of having the business.
I think, would it be helpful to bring up the those parking diagrams now, and maybe we can take a look at, sounds like we would want to combine the design of the first one and the third one maybe. And then I see there are questions in the Q&A, so we'll bring in some public comment after.
Yeah, I think to Mr. Hearn's question, I think what Mr. Hearn was saying was, paint the spot larger, not necessarily make it a, designated handicap only spot, to the comment that Dave made. And, I concur with the comments that Mr. Paff had made earlier.
Right, so this is the third option here with just all standard spaces, but yeah, like they take that one up there that's on the top right and make that be the size of what was on the first, on L1, or do that treatment there. It's a tight space out there, like it's very and if you park a car, I parked a car in kind of that first space there, and there's barely enough room for another car to squeeze by. So I mean, what's drawn here, there's not, if a van was parked in that accessible space, then I don't think it's possible for someone else to drive through the lot, but everything's by appointment. So you're not going to have that situation, and it might be beneficial not to allow people to be making U-turns in your front.
If these spaces were spread out, beginning at the corner of the building, leaving a gap at the front door, you don't need that access aisle like that. The access aisle becomes between the 2 spots. So
I agree. I thought there was a drawing like that. I agree.
I don't know why we're pushing it closer to the street.
Yeah, I think you do need to have it go closer to the street, Chris, because if memory serves, all of the accessibility is on the right side of the passenger side of the vehicle. And if you're pulling in on the one way pointing forward, you would need that side to have the room to be able to let a ramp down.
I guess if we're talking that this is going to be by appointment, I think what they're going to do, if they would need to get somebody handicapped out of the right side of the vehicle, they're going to pull alongside the building there on that side by the concrete steps, and then they'll park the car after the handicapped person has exited the vehicle.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know. I just think we're
Exactly.
maybe overthinking this. but I still, I did, looking at this again, it comes to mind, the outdoor display. I had a question for Abby. Abby, is that a by right thing, or is that something a business owner needs a permit for? I mean, we have so many businesses with sidewalk entrances, but they don't have anything outside.
Sure. I think it's, it's not considered storage, it's display, and our bylaw isn't specific for display of merchandise. So usually it's only by planning board approval. So up to the planning board on a case by case basis. Typically you don't allow outdoor storage. Outdoor display. I think outdoor storage, if it's considered storage, requires a special permit from the zoning board.
Yes,
Chairman,
because I was having trouble. Sorry, I was just having trouble finding which sign category that these display pieces would actually fall into under the zoning bylaw.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
our position is they're allowed, they're not prohibited by your bylaw. Your bylaw provides that parking areas shall, 6.1.24 prohibits outdoor sales area in parking areas. We're not proposing that. Section 5.5.6, uses within setbacks, makes clear that you cannot have a display of goods closer or nearer than 15 feet to the street line. This is a district that has a 0 front setback requirement, and we are more than 15 feet back from the street line, which is defined in the bylaw as the lot line between the street and the lot. So I take it that the fact that those provisions are in there that direct or limit how display can be done outside of a building, and the fact that it has been allowed in other areas of the town, including in this district, that is a very strong suggestion that you don't prohibit it. You may control it, you may limit it within 15 feet of the street line. You may limit it within parking areas, but we're not proposing it within a parking area. We're not proposing within 15 feet. And those appear to be allowed. They're at least not prohibited, and they don't say that they require a permit either. So that's why we're making this request. We think it can be allowed. I'm not even sure that it requires a permit, so long as we fall within those categories, or fall as long as we honor those dimensional limitations that are in the bylaw.
Thank you. I think the issue, though, is that we're trying to find a way to allow an exception for the parking requirements in a very small space. And so it's all part of the same thing here, basically. Like, it's trying to come up with something that that works, that everyone will agree is a reasonable solution when we put it all together. So the larger scale conditions, they all have to work together. So I don't think you can break it apart into pieces. But
I understand that, Mr. Chairman, and I agree. And this is a discretionary grant we are asking for. But my point was only that that part of it, I don't think is discretionary. So if the board put a condition on it, that would be something that we'd be giving up in return for a discretionary approval that we're seeking. And I think that the discretionary approval we're seeking, which makes the building usable, is probably in the final analysis more pressing to the applicant. But again, my point was, I don't think it's prohibited. There was some concern about whether it's actually prohibited. I think the answer is there's nothing in your bylaw that prohibits it within those, except for those limitations I referred to within this district. We do understand it's discretionary. I've discussed that with my client. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
thank you. This is a public hearing, so I would like to take some public comment. There've been some Q&A items added here, but so what I would, unless Mr. Gotti, you have something.
Yeah, I just would like to have a clarification as to what the applicant views those monuments, the outdoor monuments as. Is that the inventory that is being displayed and therefore signage? And if it's signage, which category does it fall under the bylaw?
Mr. Chairman, it's display of goods, which is referred to in section 5.5.6. It's not open storage, it's display of goods. I'm sorry, it's not goods, products, it's not products or materials or equipment. It is goods that are being offered for sale. And it's an example of what we're offering for sale in the same way that other businesses in the town do that. So I don't view it as signage. It's not going to have signage on it. It's simply, this is what we sell in the same way that Roach Brothers does it. The High Street Market may do it. Lambert's in a different zone does it. In a residential zone does it. That's what we're talking about. This is what we sell. Take a look at it and call us and make an appointment if you're interested. So that it's not a sign. In the same way that pumpkins outside a grocery store are not a sign. They're a display of what we're offering for sale.
Pat, would you agree with that interpretation of our bylaw?
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't call it a sign, and the building, I think we would consider it, at the planning board's discretion. Usually you have not approved outdoor storage or outdoor displays. So yeah, I don't think it's signage, but this is within the planning board's purview to allow it or to disallow us.
Do you agree, Pat? I didn't hear his answer.
It's
Yes,
just,
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
All right.
Hearing is usually not a problem, Chris.
All right, that's what, so it's within our discretion as part of crafting this whole thing.
I think,
Let's-
I
Yeah.
think other monument stores set precedent. Every time you drive by a monument store, you see their wares outside. And I think customers buy with their eyes. The traffic is, I don't know, 20 miles, 30 miles an hour. If you're asking me to put a sign there, so people have to crank their neck to the right so they can see what's inside my window, as opposed to putting the monument outside where they know when they drive by, hey, that's a monument store. They buy with their eyes, if that makes sense. Just like Roach Brothers puts their pumpkins out or their flowers, that's the first thing they want you to do before they come into the store. And that goes for Lambert's too.
All right, let's go to, we'll open it up for some people who've raised their hands that want to speak, and then we'll come back to a discussion of where we go with this. So what I'll do is there's Q&A things here, but I want to see if I will recognize the person to speak instead of just reading the Q&A. So I think Mr. Olenoff, who's an associate member of the planning board, would you like to speak?
Oh, I just had a few questions on the catch basin there. That's an old catch basin that's on the property? And so I was just wondering if there was a hood in that catch basin. Can you hear me?
Yes. Is that a question for?
Well, it's always good to bring up the stormwater system to the best water quality you can without completely replacing everything. So, for instance, does it have a 4-foot sump? If it doesn't, you have to replace the entire catch basin. But probably doesn't have a hood in the catch basin, which is easy enough to put on and makes a big difference in water quality.
So Abby, is that something we captured in the condition adequately?
I don't know if there's a hood. I don't know if there's a hood in the catch basin currently. So that might be a question for the applicant or the property owner, if the property owner is here.
If you don't know, you can just put a condition in there saying a hood is required. That's easy enough to do.
Chairman. Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
This is a building that was built in 1964. we're not proposing to do any renovations to it. We're not increasing the size or changing any of the systems. I appreciate Mr. Olenoff's comments. It's probably a question more for the owner who may be on the call. I thought he was going to be, but we're not, this isn't a case where we're rebuilding or building a new building or putting in new systems or anything. So the applicant certainly wasn't planning on doing anything other than we understand a condition has been proposed. And I think this came from engineering to clean the catch basin on a regular basis, first before occupancy, and then the condition proposed is to clean it every as needed, but generally fall and spring. Beyond that, I don't think anybody proposed to make any changes to it. It would be different certainly if we were talking about a new development or new building or a major renovation of the building, but we're not doing any of that. We're trying to, my client intends to repoint the building and paint it, make it look better, and then put it to use. So we would not really want to have to take on any conditions of fixing or renovating or upgrading a system that's been there presumably for a long time. But if the owner is on, he might be able to respond to some factual questions. I thought he was going to be on. I don't see him listed, but that's not necessarily exclusive. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Olenoff, did you have another question?
Oh, I just pointed out in section 4.1.5.32 under footnote 8 for local business A and local business B that it says a special permit is required for outdoor storage of equipment or materials. So again, how does that apply here? I was just wondering.
Right. Thank you. I think that the conclusion here was that we were agreeing that it wasn't that storage of equipment or materials. So let me see if Mr. Olenoff, do you have anything else or?
No, that sounded like, well, I don't know. What is the difference between outdoor storage and display or what? But I know in the past, the planning board has gone through reviews and told these supermarkets mentioned that the outdoor display of goods was not allowed, but somehow it never seems to be enforced, and so that's why you see that. But again, if you go way back to when the original review was held, that these storage was prohibited by the planning board.
All right, let's what I'll suggest is when we come back to go through the conditions and everything, let's just remember what we're going to deal with the catch basin, and we will of course have to deal with the overall issue of what's displayed, the monument display. Let's I'll go to another comment. Richard, do you want to be recognized? And if you could state your name and address.
The architect.
Oh, okay, you're answering a question. Okay, sorry. Then I will go on to Fran Fusco. Do you want to speak?
Hi, Dave. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. I have several concerns with this. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. I thought legally a handicapped spot has to be noted as so. I think the town is opening up a big problem by allowing this. And then also I want to know how many parking spots are they actually going to have? If it's 5 to 14, he needs one handicapped spot by law and noted as being handicapped. So how many spots are we looking at?
So we can, Abby,
7 was on the option 3 is what the planning board was looking at.
So you said 7?
7 spaces.
Okay, because I looked it up and it says legally, he has to have 1 handicap spot. And it has to be noted as handicapped. And also, to say the business is open for appointments only, how will they control this?
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
we've agreed that it'll be by appointment only. We don't have a lot of parking, so we have to control when people come in. It's not a business where we can have people just dropping in because there is no parking. And this is a particular type of business where the customers tend to call ahead and say, we want to buy a monument and can we come in and talk to you? And an appointment is made. And that Mr. Frangioso has made that clear from the beginning. And so, you know, that's the way it's going to be. We're not going to have drop-ins. Mr. Frangioso is not, who is the person who's running the business and has to be there with customers. He's not, this isn't his only business. He's going to be there by appointment only. So we're not, if somebody is by, we're not going to be able to serve them. So we've said it'll be by appointment only. We're okay with a condition of that effect. Going back to the comment about parking, I don't know who the lady is or the background or where she lives either. You know, whether she's in the neighborhood or not, and I apologize that I don't know that, but I don't. And she didn't identify herself. But as far as the handicap space goes, we've been through this with the architect, with town council, with the building department, with the planner, and with my research of what the Massachusetts regulations are. And I think they made it clear that if it's fewer than 15 spaces, there is no requirement for a parking spot. And if there's another citation, I'm happy to hear it, but I
think
want to go to mass regs.
Not to cut you off, but I think we'll discuss that and make our decision. So let's go to.
Oh, Dave, I'm not done. I have one more question.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I think you did identify yourself, didn't you?
Yeah, well, Dave, you said Fran Fusco.
And your,
Yep.
but your address is always good.
Yeah, well, I don't think he needs to know that specifically,
Mr.
but
Chairman.
you guys know I'm legit. But my other statement was that the residents of Islington do not want granite stones displayed. The town has stopped signage on other projects that aesthetically are not pleasing. So I can't imagine having stones in front of a building is gonna aesthetically look nice. I'm sorry. It's just not in a tight space. No grass around it. It's really going to be an eyesore. So, that's all I had to say.
All right, thank you for your comment. Is there, I want to see if there are any other comments we can discuss as we get to the conditions. Are there any other public comments?
Yep, there's a couple hands raised, Dave. There's a Ron.
Okay. All right, let's see, Ron. Let's recognize Ron. You are.
Mr. Lambetis is trying to get in too.
So Ron, can you identify yourself, your name and address, and then you can speak. You should be unmuted. All right, not hearing you, Ron. Let's see if we can recognize Mr. Lambrinidis.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm the owner of the building at 384 Washington Street. My name is James Lambrinidis. I had that space when I bought it. I was a small contractor, and I utilized that space for about 15 years. We're a small business. We were parking in
You got muted, sorry.
I actually think we lost.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there we go.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Like I said, that I occupied the building for about 15 years when I bought it. And all the, regarding the snow, regarding the parking, we were a small business. We parked on the sides, we parked in the front. We had no issues with the neighbors, with the surroundings. Everything was smooth for a long time till I moved out of the building. In regards to the catch basin, I'm willing to clean the catch basin. We have not done any renovations to it. I bought the building, the catch basin was existing. And to the best of my knowledge, it has been like that since I bought it. And I don't know if the town has done any renovations to it the last year or two. But I'm willing to clean the catch basin if the town wants me to do that.
Yes, okay, thank you, Mr. Lambriandis.
Yeah.
All right, are there any other comments? I'm not seeing anyone else with their hand raised. Let's see, and I'm not seeing any other comments. So let me suggest what I'm seeing, or kind of the sense of things here, and then see what board members can react to it. It sounds to me like there's a consensus that we are not happy with the display of the monuments, that we want to have an option of a curb or bollards, something to protect the store, that we want to have a space in front that's big enough for a handicapped man to park and let someone out safely, and that we want the larger number of spaces in general, and that we want the snow removal to be taken care of. That's covered by a condition. And employees parking in the back or front, it's up to them, but you can't pile the snow up in one of the employee parking spaces. Does that capture what everybody else thinks here?
That sounded accurate to what I had heard, Dave, as well.
And with under those circumstances, are we comfortable granting the special permit for parking relief?
Dave, the only thing I would say is that since we can't concretely say whether a handicap spot is necessary or not, I think we ought to leave that as a condition that has to be, really have to find out whether they do or they don't. Once we have that answer that they will willingly they have to put that spot out front if it is required.
What if we said in the condition, so we'll have to add something in here about the size of that space, but we could say, that it's the size of a it meets the requirements, the dimensional requirements for ADA accessibility, and it would be marked handicapped if required by law.
I think that would cover you. I think right now, Mr. Chairman, you have a situation where you have a conflict between a federal law and a state law. And being able to accommodate handicapped people, I myself still have a placard, makes good business sense as well. But to do it at a complete disregard for all other spaces may be placing difficulty on this business.
All right, what we're looking at on the screen, Abby, is this a draft motion?
Right, so, and then we could have an additional condition 8 that says, that the bollards or curbing shall be installed, that the parking spaces, there's room in between the parking spaces in front of the door, and that northern parallel space be increased in size for handicap accessibility and signed if required.
All right. What were there other waivers? Was there anything else we needed to vote on separately? Yeah, this stuff.
Before you leave that, let's go back to that, just to address the question that Mr. Hearn had before. Number 4, where we're talking about the parking spaces being specified at the rear. Do we want to put anything in there that creates a little bit of discretion on, you know, a non-customer day, that they can use the sides?
Right, we could
I
add,
don't want to put them in a position where they feel like if they park on the side, they're in violation, that's all.
okay, yep, so we could add to number 4 at the end, say when needed.
Chairman? Oh,
All right, so you're saying add on to the end, just say when needed?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
would it maybe be clearer if it said that employees shall not park in the spaces in the front of the building? And then the employees can park on the side or in the rear as appropriate. We're not going to be foolish about making it difficult for customers to come in and park. So if the concern is that customers have free access to the front, we're going to leave free access to the front. Otherwise, we might end up with a rather vague condition. We just don't want to require somebody to park out back when there's no need to do it on a given day because nobody's going to be showing up by way of a customer, and that they could park on the side of the building where it's easy access and all that. So that's, I'm just saying number 4 might say that employees shall not park in the spaces in the front of the building or on the
Right,
street side of the
Yeah.
building.
And it's easier to be a negative.
Clear, and it does what you want.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, and then is there,
I just want to ask Abby, who's going to be looking into the signage? Will it be you or Pat?
You mean the handicap?
Mhm.
It would probably be me along, with Pat and Joe, prior to, building permits and prior to occupancy.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So it's a group effort.
As long as it gets done. Thank you.
I hear-
all right, are we good on this screen? I'm just thinking that with the waivers, we need to vote that first, I believe. All right, so the waivers needed: exterior lighting plan, traffic study, presentation model, drainage calculations, and then
And the last one is related to the parking layout. It doesn't meet your full requirements in terms of spacing, the tandem spaces and the aisle and backup width.
all right, is there anyone wanting to discuss the waivers here? Would someone like to make a motion to grant these waivers?
I'll make a motion to waive the 4 EIDR application requirements as they're not necessary for this change of use within an existing building with minor exterior changes proposed.
Second.
All right, and just being dumb here, I'm just saying, so there's 5 bullets. So reminding, why is it 4? Is the 5th one just assumed to be a part of the big vote?
No, I just counted wrong. It's 5. Yep.
All right, I amend that to indicate 5 EIDR application requirements.
I will second that.
All right, is there any further discussion? I'm seeing no further discussion, so we'll have a roll call vote. Mr. Paff,
Yes.
Mr. Gotti,
Yes.
Mr. McCusker,
Yes.
Ms. Conant,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. All right, so then on the granting of the EIDR and special permit, are there any further questions? Are we clear? We feel that we have captured this clearly from all this discussion. Kind of like to have it. It would be great if it were already drawn up, but I think we have specified it in writing. All right, would someone like to make a motion or not.
I'm reading what Abby wrote.
Yeah, the number 2, just for clarification's sake, I think we were sort of at a hybrid of 1 and 3, were we not? We were painting it to be the size that complied with ADA space, but it was essentially the layout per number 1, other than that one modification. Am I recalling that correctly?
Could we put that back on the screen just to be sure? So I think we can, if we bring up 3 first. So this is 3. So everything that's here, except that standard space in the top right corner, would be replaced by, and then go back to 1. So this, with this access aisle and everything, is that the only change? Or Chris had also brought up, like, pulling.
Yeah, like the space in between, in front of the door, some space in front of the door.
I think if they're required to stripe it and label it as handicap, then I think you do need to do this layout. I still want it pushed forward, but I think you're required to have the space on the right and left side of the vehicle. But if we're just going to allow for space, then we don't necessarily need that exact same layout.
Given that there's ambiguity right now in terms of conflict, potentially federal and state, I think you need to do it this way, because if you have to eventually call it a handicap spot, you need the adequate space. So it's a hybrid between 1 and 3, because this one doesn't have the side parking on the side of the 2 sides of the building, whereas number 3 does. So that's the only thing that's different, I would say. It's, version 4 is that top right spot with the rest of it being what's in L3.
Right, if you could cut and paste, we would basically draw a box around the accessible space and the access aisle, copy that, and then paste it onto L3.
Correct.
Mr. Hearn, did you want to?
Well, I don't know if I might say that if we're required to have a handicap space after the additional review that's been discussed involving Mr. Doyle, Mr. Hearn, and Ms. McCabe, if the conclusion is, and you make it a condition that if they come down on that side that it's required, we'll do it. But if it's not required legally, then we might, it's been suggested that we somehow or other indicate that there's a wider space if somebody did come in, and we want to make it available for folks, but we wouldn't want a condition that says this is handicapped in a way that we're prevented from using it when it's not needed for handicap. And I see that Mr. Albord, who's our architect, has raised his hand. He might be able to shed more light on it than I can, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Richard, do you want to speak to that?
I'm hoping this is on. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good, because I had trouble. I'm at home. Now I can't see your screen. I'm suggesting that if you go to option 3 and you see there's a space to the right, upper right corner there, which would be the north corner. If that space was designated as a handicap space and moved into position which would allow it to have the space it needs, then that could be marked as such, and it's not going to impede traffic in and out. I think it needs to slide towards the street some, but it says 14.9 feet width. You need 14 for a standard space. You need 16 for a van space. I don't know if you need a van space per se. I'd have to look at 521 CMR again, but you can get one space there. If you need a van space, we'd have to push it towards the street more. But again, it's not going to impede traffic in the site.
I think we're actually all in agreement here. I think what we're saying is, we want to create a space in that upper right, Richard, that is large enough to accommodate a handicap spot, but not totally designated unless required to by this extra review from the legal team. So I think we're
Yeah,
actually
and-
all in agreement on that.
Your town council, I think, has it right. The last time I spoke with the MAAB about this, they said the ADA is an advisory law and doesn't have the teeth in it. So, but I'm not a lawyer. So that's what I've heard. And I've also heard from code experts that that supersedes it. So
I think,
I don't have a good answer for you either on that.
well, I think we're in agreement that basically, to put it really simply, we want to draw a handicap space, but not put the handicap symbol on it so that people can park there if it's not needed for handicap.
I see.
All right, so with that, does that adequately clarify condition 2?
I think with a new condition 8, we can specify the revision of that size of the space. So actually, Richard and the applicant, if you could, after this approval, if you could submit an updated plan that shows this.
Sure.
Yeah, that might be a good way to capture this. The condition is, submission of an updated plan showing the combination of these in the way that we have just described. Are there other comments on this?
So condition 8 will say review of the information for the handicap spot.
Yes.
Okay.
It'll say, to add bollards or curbing, leave room to space out those 2 parallel spaces so that there's room in between in front of the door, and that the northern parallel space be increased in size to be handicap accessible and signed if required.
Okay.
I
And
have
a
a quick
revised
question.
revised plan submitted.
Is the bollard, the intent of the bollard is to have one on each corner, is that correct?
No, not the corners only. Protection for all places where the car could go through that area. That's why we were suggesting curbing. It's lower profile. It does essentially the same thing that we're asking it to do.
Okay.
Curbing is a possibility too, parking lot curbing.
Yes, I think the idea is a car coming down Washington Street or headed towards Roach Brothers veers off the road and, maybe slowly, we don't want it to crash through the window and, into your showroom.
Well, bollards would do that better than curbing. I was thinking more of the accidental hit the gas instead of the brake as they're approaching the parking area.
You're talking about a wheel stop essentially, like
Yeah.
you would put in to prevent cars from going into the sidewalk, let's say.
Right.
Yes, I think it sounds like we're good with either a curb that would be like that or bollards, but if they're bollards, they've got to be
Need to be spaced out.
spaced in a way that a car can't get between them.
I see.
And Abby, you've captured the change to number 4 per Mr. Hearns. Okay.
Yeah.
The only other question that I would have, Dave, is, do we want for number 7 a snow removal plan filed with?
What do we think? Is that,
I don't think it needs to be spelled out. There can be no standing snow. The snow has to be removed from the site. We can't do storage behind the building of snow.
Yeah, you do get into a potential problem if you have 3 4-inch snowstorms in a week. They're all small, but now you have a lot of snow in a short amount of time. And each time they shoveled or plowed, they said, okay, this is another small one. We'll just keep leaving it on site. Then you encounter the large mounds unintentionally, really.
Mr.
That's
Chairman.
why I was asking that the back spaces not be used as a snow storage.
Yes, Mr. Hearn.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I understand the comment that was just made. We're not proposing to use the back of the building as a snow storage. But I think the question is, considering that we don't expect to have a lot of cars here, is there something wrong with having some snow piles on the property, just like most other businesses seem to have? Unless they get to the point where you really can't hold anymore without going over onto a neighbor's property, in which case we've got to take it away. We understood that for an average or minor storm, we would plow the driveway, the areas around the building. Not that on any storm, we would have to take the snow away. I don't know that other businesses are
Right, I think
the same.
if you bring up the drawing of things again, I think that the idea is you'd be able to plow around the building. So if you bring a plow in, because you're not going to push it onto the street and leave it there. So you got to bring it right in from the street, and you'd plow back to employee standard space number 2 and keep going. And you've got room there where it says ramp. You've got 15 feet plus another little bit of space. And so that you could pile the snow up there. But the concern would be that employee standard space, number 1 here becomes snow storage. And I think that's what people would not want.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with keeping snow on the property until such time it starts impeding parking and or pedestrian safety.
Right, thank you. That's okay with us.
All right, are we good on that condition then? All right, any if there's no other comments on these conditions, would someone like to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve the EIDR and special permit for relief of 4 parking spaces based on the findings presented by the applicant during the hearing and in the application material, with the following conditions as enumerated below, with the changes that have just been specified.
Second.
And just to make sure we have this right, like, so the relief of 4, are we saying, is that because
there are 11 currently, or 11 is what was required, and I think the plan that we are approving has 7.
All right. So there's a motion by Mr. Gotti, and did Mr. Paff, you seconded that?
Mr. McCusker seconded.
McCusker seconded that. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, we will have a roll call vote. Mr. McCusker?
Yes.
Mr. Paff?
Yes.
Ms. Conant?
Yes.
Mr. Gotti?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So that's the EIDR and special permit approved. And this is a public hearing, so we will need to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. Paff, second by Mr. Gotti. Close the public hearing. We'll have a roll call vote. Mr. McCusker?
Yes.
Mr. Gotti?
Yes.
Mr. Paff?
Yes.
Ms. Conant?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, so we close the public hearing. And thank you everyone. Thank you to the applicant. Hopefully this will work out for everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. We appreciate your time and your efforts on this, and hopefully this works out well for the community and for the applicant. So thank you and good night, and good luck to those who are competing tomorrow. Thank you.
Wishing the business well.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. The next item on our agenda is 710 and 722 High Street Environmental Impact Design Review. You'll recall this is also continued from our last meeting, and this has to do with the All Town Fresh and the Gulf Station on High Street. We had a number of questions that were raised, and questions from our peer review. And I understand a lot of those questions have been answered. So I will first of all recognize the applicant to update us, and then we'll hear probably from our peer review person.
Members of the board, my name is Paula Devereaux. I'm the attorney for Global Corp on this application for the property at 710 and 722 High Street. And we were last before you on April 6th, at which time we had just received the peer review report. And we understood that most of the board's questions related to stormwater and to traffic. And since that time, we have responded to the peer review report, and we've also really studied the stormwater as well as traffic, and are back before you tonight to explain our changes. And I would ask Zach Poisson from Fuller Engineering to start with that. And then Rebecca Brown is also on the call, and she can let you know about the traffic.
Hi, thank you, Paula. Again, Zach Poisson, Fuller Engineering. Abby, I would like to share my screen. It might get easier. Am I allowed to do that yet? Yeah, I think so. There we go. All right, screen 2. Please let me know when you can see. All right, so we had a few site plan changes. I'll start with those. It was mostly adding in some signage. There was a little bit of directional signage at some of the entrances, signage for the electric vehicles, just to make sure that those were noted as such. We also increased the sidewalk width from 5 to 7 feet in the back for those head-in stalls. And we had also started showing our snow storage areas along the perimeters. For the drainage, this was a bulk of the comments. We have since gone out and got test pit data in the general vicinity of this underground system, as well as a secondary location over on the other side of the building. That was just precautionary. We were able to isolate, and not isolate, but localize the drainage into one location. Those test pits were witnessed by the town as well as the, a representative from Beta. That system now has taken the roof runoff separately from the building, as well as holding the 10-year storm entirely, and with a slight discharge of the 25-year storm. We were required to only treat the, to mitigate and attenuate the 1 inch for recharge purposes within the aquifer protection area. And that 10-year storm itself, I believe, is a little over 4 inches, and the 25-year storm is, I believe, a little over 5 inches. So we're well above that 1 inch recharge. And then we also added in, we kept the water quality unit, and in discussions with Tom, sorry, Mr. Houston, we were able to bypass the system with the wooded areas on the east side of the site, as they do today. So a lot of the discharge that you're going to see, that you'll see in the storm events, are generated from that. Aside from the 100-year storm, which we do have some release, but all release, all peak flows and peak volumes have been reduced with this system. I believe those were all of the really big items. Other than, oh, I'm sorry, I did skip one site plan comment, and that was adding in the bike racks, which we are showing on the south side of the building, and shifting the parking over a little bit as well to help straighten these crosswalks. And I believe that's pretty much all of the really big items that were covered in Tom's comments. And there was one additional comment that came out about the curbing, and we were hoping to swap out and have it as an additional condition of approval to have the extruded concrete curb used precast concrete curb used in lieu of the extruded concrete curb. And I believe that's really it on my end. And Rebecca has a lot more on the traffic side. So I will stop sharing and allow Rebecca to go over the others.
Thank you, Zach. Yes, so when we met last time, there were a few comments that we still had unaddressed from the peer review consultant, Tom Houston, regarding the traffic analysis that we prepared. One of those included evaluating the intersection of Gay Street and High Street, which is the intersection just to the north of our site. That is a signalized intersection and is operating as part of a coordinated signal system with the signalized site driveway. So we did provide that updated traffic analysis of that intersection. As I mentioned, it is already part of a coordinated signal system. So one of the comments from Mr. Houston was to look at the benefits of providing a coordinated signal system, but it is already part of one today. The existing signal timings that are there now actually operate pretty well for the existing conditions and for the 7-year design horizon, using that 1% per year growth rate that we talked about at the last meeting as being consistent with historic growth trends of traffic in the surrounding area. The additional traffic from the site only generated an increase of delay of 2 seconds per vehicle on any of the movements and an increase in queues of 1 vehicle. So there's very minimal impact to the operations at that intersection. That analysis was reviewed by Mr. Houston in his most recent comment letter, and he did concur that existing signal timings appear to work well and that there is limited impact from the project at that location. But moving forward down the line, that may be something that the town might want to reevaluate signal timings in the future as other developments come forward that might increase traffic volumes. One of the other comments that came up in the peer review was to restrict the left turns entering the site driveway at the northerly driveway. I think that comment was resolved with the board at our last meeting. There were several comments from board members that felt that restricting that left turn wouldn't actually be favorable because it would force all of the left turns to occur down at the signal where there isn't a left turn lane provided, and could impact the operations of the signal at that location. As an alternative, we did do an evaluation of a 2-way left turn lane. And I'm gonna share my screen with you to show that. So we did look at a potential for shortening this northbound left turn lane that comes through here that we believe right now is striped this long to allow left turns to occur both into the driveway here into the post office, as well as up at the signal at Gay Street for the left turn here. One of the comments that was brought up at the last meeting is that in this area, as people are coming southbound, they kind of hug the center line and oftentimes cross into that northbound left turn lane to make the left turn into the site. And wouldn't it be great if it was actually a 2-way left turn lane? So we did do an analysis to show what would happen if we did actually convert this into a 2-way left turn lane here, and then continue that down into a dedicated left turn lane at the site driveway. There were some pretty substantial decreases in delay that happened as a result of doing that 2-way left turn lane. It gave us some minor reductions in the delays at the 2 driveways here, the northerly driveway and the post office driveway. Where we saw the more substantial impact was down at the signal at Hartford Street and the southerly site driveway, where the delay on that southbound approach was significantly reduced by being able to add that left turn lane. That analysis was reviewed again by Mr. Houston, and he agreed that there was some merit to doing that two-way left turn lane if that is something that the town wanted to proceed with either now or in the future. One of the other comments that came up that I believe was actually talked about and resolved at the last meeting was the need for a construction management plan that would indicate where construction workers would be parking during the construction period. And that is something that we had mentioned that we would provide as we get closer to construction actually occurring. And we would provide copies of that to the town planner and town engineer to be reviewed by them before construction actually starts, and also to the police department as well. Sorry, I left them out. Then the last comment that came up was actually from the pedestrian bicycle committee, was for eliminating the right turn driveway that's proposed down at the southerly end of the site. And there was, I think through most of our discussion at the last meeting, most board members agreed that eliminating this right turn in driveway would actually be detrimental to the impact or to the traffic operations at the signal with Hartford Street. And it would also create some additional congestion here at the front door as people are coming in and accessing the pumps on the site, creating some additional congestion there. So this driveway was originally proposed to be able to reduce that congestion at the front, allow people to slip in, park in the parking for the convenience store and access the convenience store without needing to go to the pumps. We did do an evaluation of what the impact would be to traffic operations if we did eliminate that right turn slip lane in. And what we found was that it would actually increase delay on the southbound approach by eliminating that right turn in, because what it does is it increases the volume of traffic that would be coming up and turning in this driveway in the middle. So it increases the number of conflicting vehicles with this southbound traffic. So it increased the delay on the southbound approach by about 15 seconds per vehicle as a result of eliminating that left turn, or excuse me, that right turn in. So we do propose continuing to keep that right turn slip into the site at this location based on the benefits that it provides to the intersection here at the Hartford Street intersection. And I think that pretty much summarizes what we provided in our response to comments and the outstanding items that we needed to address based on comments from the board as well.
All right, thank you, Ms. Brown. Mr. Houston, did you have want to follow up on any of this, or?
Well, just briefly, there was great concern about the stormwater management on the project, which is entirely appropriate given the location of the service station in the Water Resource Protection Overlay District. And you may remember before the stormwater management system as originally submitted had a relatively small infiltration capability. The revised system that is now before the board represents a measurable improvement. The system, first of all, captures 97% of the runoff from the actively developed portion of the site. It captures it, treats it, and infiltrates it. The system infiltrates in its entirety the 10-year frequency storm event, and except for a small discharge, infiltrates the 25-year frequency storm event. These are large storm events in terms of what is usually used to maintain aquifer recharge, which is only the 1-inch storm event. So the system certainly does its part to thoroughly recharge the aquifer, as well as providing numerous controls to abate pollution concerns.
one of the significant upgrades is that the inflow pipe into the infiltration system now has a manual gate valve on it. And if there ever is a spill of gasoline on the site, that gate valve can be closed and preclude contaminated runoff from entering the subsurface infiltration system. The other thing that the design storms of the 10 and 25-year frequency storm event, by designing the infiltration facilities to hold those large storms, it virtually eliminates any water contaminants in terms of total suspended solids and phosphorus, because by recharging stormwater, the TSS burden and the phosphorus burden are totally removed from anything that enters the town system. The other issue was transportation and traffic impacts. The study area was expanded to include the Gay Street and High Street intersection. Having included that, the analysis indicates that while the levels of service there are not good with the town's 4% analysis, somewhat better with the 1% analysis that more represents the actual increase in traffic volumes that has occurred in recent years. The important thing is if you compare the no build and build operations of the intersection, the levels of service essentially are the same, build and no build, and the increase in delay with the build alternative in all cases is less than 3 seconds with the 4% analysis and less than 1.5 seconds with the 1% analysis. The final thing I'd mention is the mitigation plan that GPI developed. That is the dual left-hand turn lane with the left turn pockets at both the Hartford Street and the Gay Street intersections. I think that provides for a more orderly and safer traffic flow in the area, in addition to improving intersection operations. So that plan does appear to have merit in terms of being implemented. And I think that is something that we would like the town DPW and engineering department to evaluate and see if it's appropriate to proceed with the remarking of that area, because it does seem to help not only the site, but it helps general traffic flow in the area. So I think those are the key things, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Houston. I see Mr. Gotti has his hand raised.
Thanks, Dave. First, I want to compliment the applicant on what was a very thorough and thoughtful response to all of the questions that were raised at the last meeting. The only question that I still have, and I guess I would direct it to Rebecca, was at one point we talked about the traffic study was conducted in August, and I forget what your seasonal adjustment factor was on that, because you know, living over near there, and Dave can attest to this as well, there is a significant difference in August traffic versus you know, the rest of the year.
Yeah, so based on Mass DOT count stations in the area, which obviously aren't directly on High Street, but they're on more highway type roadways, this seasonal adjustment data showed that August was actually representative of an average month. So we actually didn't apply any type of seasonal adjustment to the traffic volumes based on August being the average month condition. So obviously volumes in, like December, January, February tend to be lower. Volumes in like May, June, September, October tend to be a little bit higher. And August is kind of that average month condition.
Okay, thank you.
So, other questions?
I have one.
Mr. Paff?
Abby, do we have any feedback from DPW about the possibility of the double left-hand turn lane?
Yeah, so I checked in with our Public Works Department, and they checked in with the transportation engineer that we use at Beta Group. They said it could work for the two-way left turn, but they didn't recommend implementing it right now. So they suggested only if needed. So they wanted to have the new construction and new site up and running first before evaluating whether it was needed. So in your packet tonight or today that I sent you and the applicant, my suggestion would be to have a condition that the applicant submit funds in escrow that would cover the cost to restripe the area of High Street, which we estimated at $10,000. So that be submitted by the applicant and then evaluated by our transportation engineer within a year after occupancy. That way, if it is determined that the two-way left turn makes sense, then those funds would be provided by the applicant and used to do the restriping. And if it was not needed, the funds could be returned to the applicant. So that was my suggested condition, that essentially we wanted to wait and see if that was needed.
So,
and mostly is because it's a little bit tight, and then the town also just recently restriped the whole area of High Street. So there's a little bit of cost associated with removing what was just done.
Okay, so the finances is really the big impediment here. It sounds like there's no physical obstruction from pulling this off.
Beta thought it was a little bit tighter than they would normally recommend for the two-way left turns, but didn't do a full evaluation. Just on an initial review, it was a little bit tighter than they would ideally like to see. So they didn't also recommend it right now without making sure it was absolutely necessary.
So if we follow through on that condition, are we advocating a traffic study in 12 months after occupation? Is that, I mean, short of traffic accidents, a traffic study is the only way you're going to really figure out if that's something that will help. I was the one who brought up the left turn, so I feel compelled to follow through on this.
I mean, the town would evaluate. I don't know if it would be formally called a traffic study, but they would determine, however they do perform their evaluation.
But
I'm not here to think I can tell them how to do their job. They know it much better than I, so I will defer to that then.
I was thinking though, Chris, like it's the design would improve things, so why wait? Like it's needed. There's a need for things as the existing conditions are, so I'm not sure why there would be a need to delay it.
Well, so they recently, I was just looking at a Google map image. It doesn't appear to have a left turn lane on that image. So there is a left turn into High Street Market striped now, right? Or painted now.
Well, there's an island of striped yellow, so it's actually not a left. So at Hartford, it's just a bubble of like hash marks, and that's what people do is they sit on that and then turn left.
Yeah, what Rebecca just showed us, I thought made total sense personally. I don't understand why the town didn't look into a double left-hand turn lane, because the mobile station's been there for quite a long time. We've always had an entrance there. I don't know why that was not considered, or if it was considered, why it wasn't followed through on. So So Dave, you're an advocate of doing it now?
Well, that's what, I mean, I was thinking is that the conditions are already difficult, right? So if the idea is that the project is going to add some amount of traffic, and then this would be would mediate that. It's like, yeah, but it would actually be good to do it now because it would reduce, it seems like it would be an improvement that should be just done regardless of whether this project was going forward. I might be misunderstanding what Ms. Brown had done there with the analysis, but all right, what do you think on that, Ms. Brown? Do you think that the existing conditions with this new design, would that improve the traffic situation on 109?
It absolutely would, yeah. So right now there's, because of the left turn coming southbound, the lack of a left turn lane at the site driveway, there are times when the queues back up, back through the Gay Street intersection, which I believe one of the abutters that spoke at the last meeting mentioned that occurrence that does happen. By getting those few left turners into their own dedicated lane, it allows for that through traffic to keep moving and reduces down that queuing that would occur. We were seeing, delayed decreases on that southbound approach, depending on what time period and what, whether we're looking at 1% or the 4% growth rate, but anywhere of up to 102 seconds per vehicle. So a pretty substantial decrease in that with that 4% growth rate way out in the future. And I believe it was closer to 30 seconds with the 1% growth rate. So there is a pretty substantial reduction that these improvements would create for traffic flow along Route 109 in general.
Can you put that back up if you wouldn't mind just for a moment, Rebecca? I would be.
Yep, sorry, I actually thought it was up as I was talking. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Yes, so here is that plan. Yeah, so this short left turn lane here would be about 50 feet long. It would be adequate for 2 to 3 vehicles to stack in here with a third vehicle kind of trailing back into the two-way left turn lane to get those out of the flow of the through traffic. Because that's really what's creating all of that delay is the left turners that need to sit here and wait to get a gap in the northbound traffic.
Yeah, I think that left-hand turn lane makes sense because as Dave said, that they're kind of just going over the brick bubble right now. I'm concerned with this dual left-hand turn lane here because you're going to have people coming from here to turn left as people are coming in here to turn left. I think you're actually potentially increasing the risk of an accident.
Yeah, so what this does, because the two driveways are slightly offset, and they're offset in the way you want them to be, so that a vehicle that wants to turn left into the southerly driveway into the marketplace here could pull in and wait in this area, while a vehicle who wants to turn left into the Alltown could pull in and wait in this area. So they would be out of the path of each other.
Yeah, I'm not talking about those two. I'm actually talking about the left into Mobile and for the left up by Gay Street. I think you have, some merge potential issues there at sort of that little bend in the dual lane there. You see,
Rob, that exists now. You just don't have the stripe to turn left into Mobile.
Yeah.
So someone coming north on 109 would not expect anyone to turn left. But if the road was striped that way, at least they have the possibility of, oh, that's a double left. I got that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Houston.
I think the plan has merit based upon the analysis that GPI did. I don't see really the benefit of putting the improvement off. If there are minor adjustments in terms of lane widths, they are in fact minor. And I think the other thing that this does, right now it's relatively difficult for southbound traffic to turn into the northerly site entrance because they have to cross both a through lane and an opposing left-hand turn lane. So, and in waiting for the dual gap in those lanes, they're holding up the southbound traffic behind them. So I think there's merit just in getting rid of the very long left-hand turn lane that's there.
All right. And yeah, and I think Abby, like, not to try to tell the DPW when to do stuff, but it's I think it's more of a, why not get the commitment out of this project now? And then of course there'd be a timing issue of, like, you know, when it should best be done, but just don't see any reason to not do it. Other questions or comments? See.
Oh, Dave, sorry, just a note. It looks like one of the board members, Debbie, I don't know, you are recording the meeting, so we should announce that this meeting is being recorded. We can see that in the on the back end, we can see that's recording. So just so everyone's aware that we are recording this meeting.
Who, I'm recording it?
Yes, maybe I didn't notice it before until later, but maybe when you're
So how do I shut it off?
There might be a button at the bottom of your screen.
Oh, you know what? I see something up here.
Oh,
Right,
yeah, the center, bottom center, there's.
All right, I got it. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I think that must have, I read the script in the beginning, but I didn't, we must have missed that part where we announced that.
No, you announced it, but this is a case where someone else is recording it. So I think that's what Abby was clarifying.
In addition to Westwood Media Center.
Correct.
All right. Let's see. So anyone comments on the stormwater issues? Actually, I have a question for Mr. Houston. So just to simplify it, does this project, what's the net impact of the improvements? I mean, are we better off than we are today from the current conditions?
You're better off in terms of discharge volume to the street, and you're better off in terms of, markedly better off in terms of water quality. Because essentially, for all storm events up to and including the 25-year frequency storm event, there is essentially zero discharge of total suspended solids and zero discharge of phosphorus. So it's a marked improvement.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? We're going to go to public comment in a minute here. So I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Let me check I think that Q&A question is from the last one. So let's see, let's go to, we'll open this up for public questions and comments. Abby, is there anyone on the phone so that we would do the *9?
Nope, there's no one on the phone.
Okay, so I see Jennifer Berry has her hand raised, and I will recognize her.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
If you could just give your name and address.
Oh, Jennifer Berry, and I lived at 26 Edgewood Road for 21 years. And I want to make a comment on the exclusion of the repair shop. I know it's nowhere in your plans, and last time I made a comment and all I received was that it's not in the plans. But I just want to, I'm just very dismayed that a big part of our community is kind of being tossed to the curb. Here we have a Haitian American man who has been building his business for 20 years in Westwood. He's a big part of the community. He gives back to the community. And it's just really egregious that there's no that there's no space for to keep a repair shop. And I see that you've included several electric car stations, which to me, I'm not sure how that benefits Westwood. You know, who would be sitting at the electric car stations for an hour or more if they live in Westwood or passing through Westwood? It really doesn't make sense that you would need so many and take away something that is an integral part of our community. And like I said, he gives back to the community, and it's hard to find an honest and intelligent car repairman. Also, I know that he had no idea this was happening, and obviously this has been in the works for a long time. The company didn't call him until just last week to inform him what was going on. This is his livelihood. This is how he makes his living. It's how he lives. So I just wanted to put a face to what is going on. And you know, it's pretty egregious that a company would come in and not consider who is behind, what is going on, who is there, and you know, that somebody who is the community relies on. So I'm still at a loss as to why there can't be a repair shop there in addition to 1 or 2 electric spots if you really feel that that is such a necessity to our community. And I think that is what I wanted to say.
Well, thank you, Ms. Berry. Let's see, is there anyone else want to speak to that, or is there anyone else who would like to comment? I see a question. Mr. Giordano has his hand raised. I will recognize.
Hi, I have 2 points. One,
if you could just do your name and address.
I apologize. It's Philip Giordano. I'm at 20 French Street. I just would echo the anecdotal evidence regarding August. I find it that August is not likely as a representative month. I just would echo that as an anecdotal piece. The thing that I find I question is there's little discussion or consideration on the change of use. The Alltown going to Alltown Fresh is going to clearly have an impact. I've heard little discussion regarding the change in the use, and I'd be curious to hear Mr. Houston and Ms. Brown respond to that as it affects the traffic flows, et cetera, that is going to be anticipated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giordano. Do you want to, I think we did ask something like that at the last meeting, so I would be curious to know how you factored that in.
Sure, yeah, we did actually do that. So we used the Institute of Transportation Engineers, or ITE, trip generation rates to estimate how much traffic would be generated by the redevelopment. And ITE actually provides entirely separate rates for a typical gas station with repair shop versus a gas station with convenience store. But as far as the existing trips, we used what was actually counted coming in and out of both sites to estimate those trips. When we look at the proposed layout, there's a land use code known as a super convenience market. And that contains those convenience markets that typically contain like sub shops, salad bars. They have a pretty much like a food court type of use inside of them, and then also provide a lot of convenience use. But it's those types of gas station convenience stores that are have a very heavy convenience market usage in comparison to what's there today, where the fueling pumps are really the main source of trips coming to and from the site. So we did look at a different land use code when we are projecting trips for the future condition that takes into account the heavy convenience store usage that would be expected as a result of the change to the Alltown Fresh.
Thank you.
I can comment. We looked at the trip generation analysis they did, alternative evaluations using the ITE trip generation data, and I was satisfied that the future projections are accurate.
Thank you, Mr. Houston. There's a follow-up, like how does the size of this store compare to, say, your store in Plymouth? Because I looked around and that's another one that has the EV stations in it, but it's on a big open space in Plymouth.
I believe that one is a 4,800 square foot building. And this one is, was it I think it was like 4,000, so it's a little bit smaller. I think 38 is what this one is.
And last time you said your comparable was more the Northborough one, is that right?
I'm not familiar with that location, but maybe Ryan is.
And is that the same, so use the same IT, it's a super convenient store, but then the different size makes it multiply out higher?
Yeah.
All right. Let's see, are there other public comments? Anyone else want to raise their hand? Let's see. Just looking at the Q&A, there's a couple of things in the Q&A. And Wellesley, do you want to be recognized or shall I read your question? All right, so Wellesley just says, I don't understand why you don't answer Jennifer Berry's question. Why is there no consideration for the business that's there? And this person is from 44 Edgewood.
So I can respond to that. The business that's there is a tenant of Global. Global owns that property. We have a contract with that tenant to occupy that space as they're doing right now. Changing the use of that space will follow all the agreements within the lease with that tenant. Will not displace him illegally. But our company is moving towards the all-town fresh model, which are offering more organic and locally sourced foods made to order, as opposed to the auto mechanic. I don't disagree that there's a place in every community for an auto mechanic, a good auto mechanic. This just isn't the one for us right now as a company.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Public. All right.
Dave, I have a question for Rebecca.
Yes.
When she used the term super convenience store, does that term encompass this? If it's my understanding that this store will have an app where you can pre-order food, and I'm guessing then that we're going to have like DoorDash, Grubhub going in to collect the food and deliver it. Is that factored into the trip calculations inside of this super convenience stores that they're using, or?
Yeah, so whether someone goes to the store and picks up their sandwich themselves, or they have DoorDash going there to pick it up for them, it really doesn't change the number of trips that it generates, because it's still a person that is driving there to pick it up and leaving. With apps like DoorDash, it can actually reduce the number of trips that are generated, because a DoorDash driver could pick up more than one order at a time and take it to multiple people. But yes, when we use the ITE trip rates, it does account for people like, it could be, say, like a Subway sandwich shop or something like that can sometimes be inside those super convenience stores, where it does account for people that would be ordering online and coming to pick up. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions here? All right, so the next step here, Abby, do you want to present the a draft motion or conditions and kind of walk us through if that's what we're?
Sure, I'll pull up on the screen if that's helpful. I did provide a draft list of, well, there was 3 waivers that were needed. And then I prepared some conditions that I sent to the planning board members and the applicant. So I'll just pull that up so we can kind of walk through those. Just a moment. Okay, so there were, can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
So there were 3 waivers needed with this application. The first one was for the application requirement for the presentation model. The second one is for having more than 2 curb cuts within the 150 feet of intersecting streets. So that's really a waiver that the planning board can grant, given that this is a pre-existing site. There's a reduction in curb cuts going from 4 to 3 with this proposal. And then the third one was for the relief of the amount of coverage over the pipe drain line cover. And then some draft conditions. The first one the applicant had mentioned earlier about submitting a revised plan to replace that the curbing shown on these plans with the precast concrete curbing. That the applicant submit an A&R plan to combine the 2 properties. Prior to issuance of a building permit, the applicant submit the mechanical details to demonstrate compliance with the noise requirements in the zoning bylaw. Number 4 is that the applicant, once they have further details on any energy efficient fixtures or technology, to submit that to staff. Number 5, the applicant had mentioned this earlier. This was about submitting a traffic control plan for during construction to myself, the town engineer, and police department to review traffic flow and parking during construction. Number 6 is that the applicant owner is responsible for hiring a licensed site professional to supervise the removal and disposal with the underground tanks. The copy of this decision be kept on site at all times. Then we go into prior to occupancy. I'd recommended all landscaping shall be installed prior to occupancy unless occupancy occurs during the winter months. Then it would be a conditional occupancy permit with a requirement for the plantings to be completed at the next growing season. That the applicant submit a final as-built plan showing all the utilities and parking, landscaping, in PDF and AutoCAD format. Number 10 is that myself and the town engineer go out and do an inspection prior to occupancy permit, which is issued by the building department. Condition 11, this is the one we, up for discussion. This was, in my discussion with Public Works, they didn't recommend this change right away, but the estimated cost for the line restriping on High Street was $10,000. So you can modify that tonight to the applicant shall submit $10,000 for the restriping for that 2-way left turn on High Street. So that one, you might want to tweak that language. And then condition 12 is for the exterior lights other than security lights to be turned off within an hour after close of business. Number 13, there shall be at least 1 trash and recycling receptacle outside the building on the property and cleaned daily. Condition 14 was about making sure that that dumpster enclosure is, those gates are closed, it's gated, it's repaired as needed. Same with the fence, that existing fence is proposed to remain, but should be repaired and replaced as needed if sections were to fall down. Condition number 16 is a standard condition that the applicant is responsible for filing any other required permits. And we know that there is a requirement for some special permits needed with the zoning board, also a filing for the stormwater review with the Conservation Commission. Number 17 is this approval is good for 2 years as long as activity starts within 2 years. And then the last suggested condition is having to do with if there's any changes to these plans in the future, that first it needs a written request submitted to the planning office to determine if it's a minor change or if it needs to come back to the planning board.
Thanks, Abby. Yeah, okay, go ahead. What was the question?
It was one of the conditions that Abby just read sparked memory. I went to this mobile twice last week, once to get gas and once to get a bottle of water. And both times I noticed the enclosure for the dumpster was flapping in the breeze, the strong breezes we had, winds. So I know no one here maybe is involved in the management of this, but greater detail needs to be paid attention to with regard to the dumpster enclosure. No one was taking trash out or anything like that. And I'm not usually one to point out things like this, but it is a condition. We're moving to a new location. I know you probably don't want the auto close gates for ease of removal, but it was just something I felt as Abby was reading that compelled to mention. I saw it on 2 occasions. The dumpster enclosure was just blowing in the wind.
I have a question for Mr. Hearn. I just is reading through this and thinking about it. So if you, Abby, if you scroll down to that, the yellow question 14 or 11, I just want to make sure we're okay with this condition, because I just want to acknowledge that, we don't control the, the planning board doesn't tell the DPW what to do. It's that as a part of this, we would be having a condition that the applicant is funding this improvement. But are we good with this condition? Like, is it okay as it stands, or does this create an issue if we're trying to overreach or anything here?
Well, the select board are the commissioners of streets in Westwood. So I suspect the applicant would have to go to the select board or have the DPW go to the select board and get approval for this change. It's kind of a horse and buggy situation, which comes first. So I would encourage the applicant to get this plan in front of the select board as quickly as possible, in case there needs to be some modification at the back end if the select board doesn't agree with the left-hand turns.
Can I speak to that? I think we're probably okay with that. I think one of the issues that I would like to try to avoid is sort of between a rock and a hard place. If the planning board says we have to do it, but the select board or the town engineer or the engineering company says, no, don't do it yet. I just want to make sure that that the applicant is covered here.
I don't know what you mean by covered. Could you define that further for me?
Well, I just want to make sure that that the applicant is not going to be held to something in this condition that it cannot do because another town board or department says, we don't want you to do this now.
Well, I think we don't know what the select board's opinion is going to be on this change. So the quicker you can get in front of them, the quicker you can identify a potential conflict. And then you may have to come back before the planning board if the select board says, no, we don't want this change. I don't know how they're going to view it.
And aren't you covered anyway? Because this says, if after a year, the escrow would be returned. So if there was dragging from either a board or a department, you essentially get the money back.
I have a feeling the select board would act on this fairly quickly. They are constantly concerned about traffic, especially on 109 and 1A. So if you can get on their agenda quickly, I think you can get a resolution and your client will not be put between the proverbial rock and hard place.
Right, I'll just add, because, given the timing, since last week with the revised plans, we didn't have time to get this back before, the select board or, Public Works. The director wasn't here last week, so I only had, conversations with him, but we didn't have a full meeting. So it hasn't been fully vetted yet. So that's why I drafted it this way.
I think the language as it is here is, in other words, we have an idea that we want this to happen soon, but the language here is pretty clear for the applicant. It's, if for whatever reason it was not recommended or something, then they have a way out of that. But assuming that it is approved, then it's a clear commitment here.
And I think we are okay with this language, so that I think that does cover it as well.
Okay, so once, so after this is, finalized, the applicant, I can work with you and we can get this scheduled before, with the select board. That way they can have time to review it. So you don't have to wait, a year, so we can get an answer on that.
So Dave, do you need a motion on the waivers first?
Yes.
Are we ready for that?
Is there anybody else want to talk more? I don't see any hands raised. Let's go with the waivers then.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we grant the waivers requested by the applicant for the 710-722 High Street project. The 3 waivers as requested.
Second.
All right, there's a motion. Mr. Gotti, seconded by Mr. Paff. And is there any discussion? Then we will have a roll call vote. Mr. Paff,
Yes.
Mr. Gotti,
Yes.
Ms. Conant,
Yes.
Mr. McCusker,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. The waivers are granted. And anything else for the approval?
So we're keeping the condition to wait a year and assess instead of the more immediate approach that you alluded to, Dave.
I'm saying the language, yeah, stick with the language that's there, because I think
Just
that.
wanted to verify that. All right, I'll make a motion to approve the EIDR for 710-722 High Street with the conditions enumerated by Abby earlier.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. I do see a hand raised, and
I think that's been there for a while. It may have been his original.
okay. Oh, Mr. Giordano, did you have anything to add, or
I was just going to make a suggestion that, given the fact that the escrow is going to be established, I would suggest that an actual study be done, not just the open-ended language of the necessary consideration and the approval is useful, but I would suggest that the escrow be raised and that the applicant bear the cost of an actual formal study. There's a variety of issues that everyone is kind of accepting their representations, which are fine, but nobody's going to really know what's going to be the outcome until 12 months. And with an increased escrow and a slight adjustment to the language that Abby had proposed, I think with a formal traffic study and some parameters, it might be better positioned to make sure that that situation is given specific guidance, and if the money's released back to them because there's no concerns, then everyone's going to be happy. That was just I had my hand raised for quite a while, but that's okay. That was the
I
comment.
just want to make sure so I would ask Ms. Brown and Mr. Houston, or like, how would that, isn't that what we did? You did a study and it's been peer reviewed by Mr. Houston.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not sure what the study would really show. If we were to redo a study and provide an analysis of what the benefits would be, it's going to show that there is a benefit from doing this. So I'm not sure if that's the type of study that you're looking for, or if you're looking for us to do like a post-occupancy monitoring study that says, is there actually a problem? Like that might look at, are people actually using that driveway? Is there a problem? What are the queues today? But I think there is a need for it today, so.
Well, the study clearly demonstrates that you're basing it upon assumptions and it is projecting into the future. Historically based on a 12-month basis, when you actually have some data, it would be far different than what we're doing sitting here today. So my point is, having an escrow established with a higher amount with some real information, which is actual as compared to assumption-based, might be more useful as compared to just, it's drawing an analogy to your use of the month of August. Anecdotally, I would agree with the comments earlier that August is not a representative month. You may say it is on Route 128 or elsewhere, but anecdotally, I don't think it is. I'm suggesting a higher escrow with actual data as compared to one based upon assumptions. That was my point that I was just trying to jump in on.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Giordano. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the board? Then I'll call for a roll call vote. Mr. Paff?
Yes.
Mr. Gotti?
Yes.
Ms. Conant?
Yes.
And Mr. McCusker?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. And so that's the motion is approved. And this is a public hearing, so we will need to close the public hearing. Someone make a motion.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for 710 and 722 High Street.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Mr. Paff?
Yes.
Ms. Conant?
Yes.
Mr. McCusker?
Yes.
Mr. Gotti?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, so the public hearing is closed. And thank you all for responding to this, and thank you for quickly responding to this. So we did not believe that from the last meeting, it sounded it was going to be very challenging to get the data for the stormwater stuff, and I appreciate the effort that was put into this application.
I want to thank you, the town planner and the entire board and everybody that worked on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, everyone. So the next item on the agenda is that 188 Mayfair. And I'm going to be recusing myself from this item. So I'll ask Mr. Paff to chair the meeting for that discussion, and then I'll come back after the end of that discussion.
Okay. Is the applicant available?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead with your presentation?
Great. Thank you very much for taking the time to hear me on this. My name is John Murphy. I am the Director of Operations at NatureWorks Landscape Services out of Walpole. Last year in June of 2020, we received a phone call from Timothy Gagnon for design services for his property on 188 Mayfair. Over the past year, we've been working with him to kind of create the landscape of his dreams. He recently done some work on his home, I believe prior to 2017. And He's looking to do this landscape project in phases. First phase is starting in the back, and we will be doing some excavation and a lot of soil replacement on site. The soil there is very rocky, bony, not sustainable for a perennials, plants, turf, etc. What we will be doing in the back will be installing a natural boulder wall along the top, exposing a little bit of ledge, creating planting pockets for vegetation for the future. We will be removing approximately 250 yards of soil and importing 250 yards back for said plantings. But this will be done in phases for the homeowner's budget. So we are just looking for approval to do so.
Hey, sorry, I was turning upside down.
Sorry, I didn't, I don't know how to turn it the right way, but the planning board had the landscape plans in the packet. I think maybe at least maybe one or two of you were here in 2017. This property received an earth material movement approval from this planning board. However, that wasn't, the work associated with that approval didn't move forward, and it expires after 2 years. So Mr. Murphy has resubmitted the application, but with a new revised plan. So it was the proposed landscape plan is what is proposed now going forward with this the new landscaping and with the new fill material. So it's slightly different than what was approved in 2017.
And Abby, we have a report from Beta on this. Can you give us a synopsis of their findings?
Right, so Beta had noted the discrepancies between the 2017 plan and the landscape plans. So I did talk with the applicant this morning and then with Beta Group when they reviewed this. So there was just confusion on what was being proposed now. I did clarify that with Beta Group, and so they were trying to submit a memo. I just didn't see an updated one come through this afternoon, but there are new recommendations based on the proposed landscape plans would be that the planning board require dry wells be installed. In 2017, you had required that the water from the roof runoff be captured and infiltrated to the dry well. So the old plan showed 2, so they would have that recommendation again for this project, that being revised on the plans. Also, a conservation review for the stormwater is needed, so I suspect they would also have the same request.
So, Mr. Murphy, you're aware of that?
Yes, I am.
And that's all part of your plan?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I'll open up to board members. Any questions?
Abby, I saw the responses to the Beta proposals from the applicant. Was there any feedback from Beta on those answers? Were they satisfied?
Yes, but just they thought you should impose and the applicant should agree to capturing that roof runoff. That was important. And then also you did have some comments from the police department. There was this concern for during the construction when the fill is coming on and off to have a police detail provided by the applicant.
If we are loading and unloading in the driveway, would we still need that police detail? Because that would be the plan, to use the driveway as the loading and offloading. And material coming out would be loaded and fill would be brought back in and distributed kind of simultaneously.
Was that the police's understanding, the police department's understanding, Abby? Do you know that or not?
I'm not sure exactly, but maybe we could, for the condition that I had suggested for you we can modify it to say as required by the police department.
I'm somewhat familiar with this property. I don't know where else you could fit a truck other than the driveway.
Yeah, the driveway is really the only spot. And our access point will be from the front yard going to the right side of the property.
So how would you get it from the outside of the house to the driveway?
A skid steer loader.
Okay. And when do you anticipate this removal? And
I'm sure the homeowner would love to get started as soon as possible, as this property has been, as it states now, for quite some time.
Okay. Any other board members have any other questions?
You're going to be following this plan that you submitted to us, correct?
Correct, the one from Chris Dindal.
Right. You're going to have nothing to do with the 2017 site plan.
Other than the two proposed drywall locations, correct, nothing else.
And what's the footage of material you're going to be removing?
The square footage, I believe it came to about 0.3 acres. It was right about that. That's the proposed kind of area of work.
Okay, thank you.
It says 12 to 27 truckloads is the anticipated trip generation.
It's approximately 250 cubic yards of material. So however, we'll be coming in and out with 10 yards at a time.
Okay.
That's the only amount that the vehicle can get into the driveway to support.
And Abby, do we have a recommended path of travel for the trucks?
Yeah, I suggested just only from Hartford Street, because I think that import and export is coming from Medfield.
Yeah, from Sam White and Son. So that would be the
109 to Hartford.
Correct.
Location.
Or Hartford to 109 to 27.
Right, going back that way.
Yep.
Okay.
Abby, has the abutters comments been addressed?
Yes, you did get some comments from the abutter at 182 with concerns about disturbance and work that had been done and possible tree removal on their property at 182. I see that they are here and have their hand raised. So when you
okay. Yeah, we're gonna get
when
to
you
that.
get to that public comments.
Okay. We did have a question in the Q&A. Is that the gentleman? No. Loading in driveway possible on a steep driveway. Mr. Murphy, your comments on the steepness of the driveway? And
I don't believe the slope of the driveway has an effect with loading the vehicle.
okay. Thank you. Any other comments or questions by board members before we turn it to the public? No? Okay, seeing none. I see two hands raised. First on the list is Mr. Giordano. Abby, can you facilitate that? Thank you.
That's my apologies. I forgot to lower my hand. I did not have a comment.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
All right. Thank you. Next is Matthew Hollingsworth. Hello, sir.
Hello, how are you this evening?
Good, thank you.
Good. Glad to be here. Thank you very much for taking my comments. So one of the things that
before you, sorry, if you
oh, sure.
The name and address, please.
Sure, yes. So my name's Matthew Hollingsworth and I live at 182 Mayfair Drive. We are the abutting property to the homeowner.
Okay.
One of the things that I hadn't noticed that had been looked at and addressed in 2017, but does not appear to be addressed now, are the trees that were removed on the town's property. They were large trees, around 55 to 65 feet tall, and they had been removed from the town's property. And I'm curious as to why they're not going to be addressed at this point to be replaced or to be to be put back.
Abby, do you have knowledge of town-owned trees being removed?
They're on the 2017 plan. They're noted as stumps. That was one of the reasons why he had gotten into a little hot water to begin with, because he had removed some trees from the town's property.
So in 2017, you're saying they were stumps?
Correct. They've been stumps for a while.
A while before 2017?
Just before 2017, when he started to clear cut his property. His property had trees all over it, and then it was clear cut, which is of course his purview to do so because it's his property. But at the time, there were 3 very large trees that were removed in front of the property that sat on town property.
Was our order in 2017 to replant trees?
It was part of the order.
Abby, I see you looking something up.
Yeah, I'm just looking on, then if they were removed, then they should be replaced.
Okay, Mr. Murphy, are you aware of the trees or the stumps he's talking about?
I actually grew up in Westwood, so I do know the stumps that he's talking about. I was unaware that they were on the town property before we partnered with the Gagnons to do architectural services, but it does clearly state on the land disturbance mitigation plan provided by RIM that there are 3 stumps that say that they should be mitigated. They should be replanted.
Okay. Then I think we could include that. Or can that be added to this earth material movement special permit, Abby?
Yes, I believe you could add that as a condition.
Okay.
Does it, even though we, like with all the vegetation we have coming into the property, does any of that suffice for replacement of plant material? It is going to be heavily planted along the town property line, along Hartford Street.
I believe you're gonna have to replace those trees. If that was the previous order, you're gonna have to replace the trees. What type of trees were they, do we know?
I believe they were Pinus strobus, just white pines.
They were 65-foot pine trees, just like the one that's planted right in front of my property.
Yeah, it'll take a few years to get back to that condition.
Well, no, and I'm quite aware of that. That's a little facetious, but yes, they were. My feeling would be that the town would benefit by having the 3 trees replaced, possibly by some pine trees that would allow people coming down Hartford Street to not look specifically at a big house just sitting there, but to also see some green as well. And again, this is for you to decide, but my feeling is that when people drive down Hartford Street, they see this big, huge house, whereas what they used to see was a house sitting behind pine trees.
If I could make just a suggestion to not use pine trees, maybe an Acer or a Quercus, so like a pine or not a pine, I'm sorry, maple or an oak, just something more deciduous than something that's going to grow to be 150 feet right on the edge of the property on a slope.
Without seeing a plan, we typically would leave something like species up to the town planner. So
Right.
I'm not even aware of where on this property we're talking, to be honest with you.
It would be along the corner of Mayfair and Hartford.
We could maybe suggest a condition that the 3 trees be replaced by the applicant with the specific species to be approved by the town planner and tree warden. We have a tree warden in Public Works that I would review, and we should coordinate with the Public Works Department about any work within the right of way.
Great. I'm also a Mass certified arborist, and I've worked with them before.
I think that seems like a reasonable approach.
Great.
Okay, Mr. Hollingsworth, any other comments or concerns?
Sure. Couple concerns which I had already written to Abby with regards to when the homeowner had previously excavated the property. He had excavated the property in between his property and our property. And when he had dug out his property, he had taken fill and placed it on our property in order to excavate his property. And we would like to require that when he does his excavation again, that he take back that property that he placed on ours as a condition of this permit, so that we can resolve this matter. I sent some pictures to Abby, and I'm more than happy to show anyone where he's done that. It's quite evident, and it's very clear that it was done when he did his excavation. The dirt is the same and so forth, and it's quite clear that it's not the same as the dirt that's currently on our property. We would like to require him to take that back and to clean that up as a condition of doing this.
Are you saying that's been there since for the last 4 years?
It's been there for the last 7 years.
Okay, 7 years.
Yeah, okay. He excavated the property just about when we moved into the property. He had just excavated the property just previous to that, and it's been like that. And it's very clear. There's no anyone who looks at it can see that that's how it was done, and there's no question about it.
Is it the mound of dirt to the left of their garage?
It is.
And there's trees growing up through there now.
Oh yeah, there's trees all through it.
Okay. Abby, again, that is not something that appeared on the 2017. So is that extending beyond the bounds of this earth material movement special permit? Or Mr. Hearn, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, to me, it seems like a private matter between two homeowners. 7 years is, and maybe let me ask, has there been attempts to rectify this situation in the 7 years?
Yes, there have been several attempts. As a matter of fact, during the 2017 planning board meeting, we had also attended that, along with several other people who live on Mayfair Drive. And we had attempted at that time to also have this discussed. And at the time, the planning board pretty much said that that was out of their purview. Quite honestly, I don't believe it's out of your purview. I believe that it's the quickest, easiest, and simplest way to rectify the situation. Otherwise, we're going to end up having to go to court, which is expensive and time consuming and messy. And quite honestly, there is no question as to how the dirt got there. You can look at it and see it. It's just, we just want it taken back. We'd like our property restored to the way it was.
Mr. Hollingsworth, I know if we do move forward with this, it's only 124 square feet that you're talking about, and I'd be glad just to eat the cost of that, just to make amends for whatever's going on between you and Mr. Gagnon.
Yeah, sure, and I appreciate that, and I really do appreciate that. I just don't want you to have to eat the cost and so forth.
We'll be doing work in that area. It's going to take us less than an hour. So,
Mr. Chairman, if the parties agree to a resolution, I think it's.
That's what I was going to say. I think
parties agree to something. It's probably a good idea for the planning board to stay out of that.
Yes. Okay. Are there any other matters, Mr. Hollingsworth?
Just one other matter. I know that it was talked about as in phases. And I'm sure we're all aware that this property has been under construction for over a decade. I would like to find out what kind of teeth the planning board have with regards to conditioning this approval as far as just getting it done, because of the fact that we've literally all had to sit here and look at this for a decade. And yeah, while I'm the only one talking, I think I speak for everyone who lives on this road.
Well, the duration of the earth material movement special permit is what, 2 years, Abby?
They have 2 years to start the work. So there's no required end time to finish it. It just needs to be started within 2 years. So generally planning boards approval there's no required end time. Usually at some point, you know, with the building, when an occupancy is finalized, that's when I would go out and inspect. In this case, someone's already living there.
Yeah, there's a number of reasons that a project may drag on: personal finances or health, or in the town or the planning board just can't mandate, you know, get it done faster, even though it's been so long already. We understand your situation, but it's just not something that the planning board has within its power to enforce.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next person, I did see a question by Mr. O'Connor. Will end date be set? No, we just discussed that. Ron has his hand raised. Say your name and address, please.
Actually, it's Rachel Pausner, Ron's wife. I'm at 162 Mayfair Drive.
Thank you.
We are just a couple doors up from this project, and I would like to support what Mr. Hollingsworth said, that it's been very difficult on the neighbors to see this unfinished property and some of the problems that have come around, some of the work on the property. So he is not standing alone. So I hope this doesn't drag on too. I hope there's some resolution. It's not been pleasant for us.
Yeah, I can understand that. Thank you very much. Next is another Ron Guerrera. Hello? You're muted. Mr. Guerrera? Okay, I'm not able to hear his question. If you'd like to type a question in, if you're having trouble with your audio, you can type it in the Q&A. I'll try to address it that way.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
I'm sorry. I use Zoom all the time, and yet this is being run differently, and I'm having a little trouble with the hand raising and all that. So I apologize.
Oh, you got it. You say your name and address, please.
So I'm Ron Greer. I'm Rachel's husband. I also live at 162 Mayfair. So yeah, not to sort of take more time than we're entitled to. I'm having a little trouble understanding the concept that a zoning board can regulate what's done, but not how, when it gets done. Essentially, if a homeowner were to do something that was really unacceptable and leave it sitting there for a period of time, it would seem the zoning board would have some authority to change it. I mean, I appreciate that people have financial constraints, but we've seen no effort to complete this work. The property lies dormant for years at a time. It's difficult to look at this and to contemplate this going on indefinitely, and yet continue to disrupt the property further. I just wanted to make that point. There may be nothing you can do, but I honestly don't understand the concept.
Well, as the planning board, this is, we typically don't deal with single family home developments like this. It's only the presence of the earth material movement, the bringing in or the excavation of fill that we are brought in to administer or deny a special permit. So this is our only review into this until we get an occupancy permit and certificate of occupancy. And that's when the town planner would be involved in that. But it's mostly through the building department in this particular situation for the building of the house and the development of the lot. Frankly, we just don't have the teeth that I think you're hoping we do to enforce deadlines and such on a project like this. So while we understand your frustration, there's really nothing that we as the planning board can do to settle this. As town council, Mr. Ahern mentioned earlier, it is largely a private matter between the homeowner and their neighbors.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
You can inquire of Mr. Murphy how long he thinks this project will take to complete.
So he had alluded to phasing. Has the homeowner indicated to you how many and how long that would take?
No, I do not have a time frame. I just know that phase one will be rear of the property first, followed by the front of the property, just due to access.
So it's 2 phases?
I believe so, yes.
How much of the job is phase one? What percent? In your
I would say
including the left-hand side of the driveway.
Yeah, I'm gonna say the left-hand side, I would partner with the phase two in the front. Phase one is about 30% of the project.
Okay. All right. Well, and how long do you think it'll take you?
Phase one?
Yes.
I would say no more than 60 days.
Okay. Because that the timing seems to be the crux of the inquiries here, the duration.
I can totally appreciate it. I mean, I've driven by this property for many years as well. I'm sure everybody on the street would love for this place to look beautiful, which is what we're trying to do. But ultimately, it is up to the homeowner and how fast we move.
Well, the caller, or they did mention, we've seen no effort, and I'd like to submit that Mr. Murphy's presence here is the latest effort to fix this. So, any comments, questions by board members may have come into your mind while we were talking?
No.
Okay. I see Mr. Guerrera has his hand raised again. Oh, and now it's down. Okay. And I don't think there's any more questions in the Q&A. No. So, Abby, do you have a list of conditions? Any waivers need to be considered?
Yeah. There are no waivers. Let's see, can you see on the screen?
Yeah.
My suggestion was for condition number 1, just direct access from Hartford Street only. Number 2, applicant shall provide a police detail for the import and export. I would add the words as required by the police department. So the applicant should coordinate with the police department directly on that. Number 3 was to install the 2 dry wells to capture the roof runoff as proposed with the 2017 approval and shown on revised plans that shall be submitted to myself and the conservation agent. Number 4 has to do with staking the property line in the field. That's to clearly indicate where those boundaries are, since the abutter did talk about some, removal and some material on his property, so that boundary should just be clearly identified in the field. Condition 5 is the applicant shall repair any damage to the right-of-way. Condition 6 is about protecting Mayfair from loading and unloading during construction. Number 7 is related to the applicant is required to file with the Conservation Commission. And then I would add condition 8 for the applicant to replace those 3 trees that were removed in the right of way. The exact species and location, species and location to be approved by myself and the tree warden in the Public Works Department.
Abby, quick question for Mr. Murphy. John, is it safe to assume that with the replacement of those trees, you'll be taking out the existing stumps?
Yes, the stumps that were on the homeowner's property are planned to be removed, but if you feel the stumps need to be removed on town property, we certainly do so.
I think that'd be appropriate.
Yeah, I think it's, we need to, even though it's town property, we just have to consider it's just another neighbor. And that's what would be done to a neighbor or for a neighbor.
Great.
So Abby, right in there, the inclusion of the stump removal or something like that.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone have any additions to the conditions or other amendments to be made? Okay, and seeing no other hands raised, no other questions, I'm ready for a motion. Someone like to make it?
I'll make a motion to approve the earth material movement application for 188 Mayfair Drive with the conditions previously reviewed.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. I'll take a roll call vote. Ms. Conant?
Yes.
Mr. Gotti?
Yes.
Mr. McCusker?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. So that motion passes 4-0. We have one abstention or recused. I don't know if that's considered an abstention or not. Do we need to close this?
I'll
Do you
make
hear
a motion to close the public hearing for 188 Mayfair Drive.
I'll second that.
Okay, we motion in a second. Mr. McCusker,
Yes.
Ms. Conant,
Yes.
Mr. Gotti.
Yes.
I vote yes as well. This hearing is closed. Thank you very much, Mr. Murphy. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
your time. Good luck.
Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave, the gavel's yours.
Hey, thanks, Chris. All right, the next item on the agenda is an A&R plan for 25 Clapboardtree Street.
Right. So you have in your packet was submitted an approval not required plan. If you remember from your March meeting, you approved the special permit for those 2 age-restricted units at 25 Clapboardtree. That was previously shown as Lot 2. So the A&R plan is combining Lot 2 with the Lot 7. That's the lot with all the other the 40 age-restricted homes at 45. So this plan is just combining that all into one lot, as was the number 1 condition of that special permit from March. So there's no concerns with this plan. So I recommend and that you vote to endorse this. And then if you can, come by, the plan, the Mylar is on its way. Actually, it's going to be received at Carby Street on Wednesday. So if you're able to come by Thursday or Friday before 1, or I could bring it to town meeting on Monday night. So you could sign it at town meeting on Monday night.
All right, thanks, Abby. Any discussion? Any questions? Then could I get a motion to endorse the A&R?
Make a motion to endorse the A&R for 25 Clapboardtree Street as submitted.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. I'll have a roll call vote. Mr. McCusker,
Yes.
Ms. Conant,
Yes.
Mr. Paff,
Yes.
Mr. Gotti,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. All right. And we have meeting minutes from April 6th. And are there any corrections or changes to those meeting minutes?
Dave, there was just a couple of on the comments by the board members. Page 1. I think it was actually, it's the 3rd comment down. Let me see. It says, when do they anticipate deliveries? Applicant responded he can will orders. Just some, I'm not really sure what that means. Just a few changes there. And then on the second page of comments, the sixth one down, something about, does the appointment only nature of the business change the ADA compliance of debt allocating? So I don't know what that means either.
Yeah.
So if you just go back and kind of fix those up a little bit.
Right, Abby or
Okay.
Jessica, could you?
Yeah, I'm just looking at it now. I think it meant to say the depth of the space, so I can
autocorrect. Yeah.
Did you get the second one too, though, Abby? What was the?
Yeah,
Debbie
that
had
was
two
the second
comments.
one. Yeah, that was the second one.
Oh, the first one, page 1, third comment.
Yes.
Back to the videotape.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. I might have to
You
go
can
back.
bill the orders. Okay. All right. I think we can.
We could probably just delete that third bullet. I think it's kind of redundant on page 1, the third bullet on page 1.
Yeah. I mean, why don't we just delete the bullet? I mean,
Where is it redundant, Abby?
The third bullet on page 1 under board comments.
Yeah.
And on the sixth one, the other one that Deb pointed out, it's really just take out the word debt. Right? Does it change the ADA compliance of having to allocate one spot? Right. So that was the essence of the question. I remember asking that.
Okay.
all right. So are we good with just deleting the bullet for the deliveries? And any other edits? All right. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes?
I'll make a motion. We approve the minutes submitted with the changes just mentioned.
I'll second.
All right. There's a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Mr. Gotti.
Yes.
Mr. Paff.
Yes.
Mr. McCusker.
Yes.
Ms. Conant.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Let's see, we have one other item. Abby, do you want to go over that?
There's the Massachusetts Vulnerability Preparedness Program. They have a grant, an action grant available right now. It's due next week, at the end of next week on May 7th. So I would like to submit, I started working on submitting a grant proposal to have assistance with writing a Climate Action and Resiliency Plan. One of the requirements is any letters of support. So my ask of you tonight is to vote to have, I guess, the chair submit a letter of support for submission of this grant. This was one of the items listed, or creating a climate action and resiliency plan was listed in the comprehensive plan as a high priority. I have mentioned it to WEAC, the Environmental Action Council, as well. So I'd like to reach out to them as well. But I'm hoping tonight you would authorize a letter of support be submitted by Dave that I could include with that application. I could work on that with Dave over the next several days.
Support that.
Right. Any objection? No objection. Do we need to vote on that, or just let's?
No, just I think ask for objections.
Okay.
No objections.
Don't see any.
Okay.
Great. Do we have anything else on the agenda tonight?
No, but I know this is a big week for everyone. This will be the last time everyone's here virtually, that we're all together. So I just wanted to thank everyone, especially this last year with you know, going virtual and COVID, and Mike for stepping in for the last few months, and for all of you the last couple meetings, and tonight getting through everything before there's a board changeover. So thank you, and hopefully I'll see you in person again someday, or a town meeting next week outside.
Dress warm.
Before we make a motion to adjourn, Dave, I know that this is Debbie's last night on the planning board, and we all spend a lot of time, you know, in these meetings. And so anybody who is willing to put themselves out there for the duration of a term deserves thanks. So Debbie, thank you, and wish you well on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Good luck, Deb. Good luck to all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
I'll make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second that.
All right, roll call vote. Mr. McCusker,
Yes.
Mr. Gotti,
Yes.
Mr. Paff,
Yes.
Ms. Conant.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
Good luck,
Hi,
guys.
everyone.
Yeah.
Good luck.